Hello, everybody. Hello. I feel like these last couple weeks, like I've gotten so relaxed about coming here and doing this, which is amazing. And then I'm like running, trying to slide into home base to get here on time. So yeah, I think I nailed it today, perfect timing, divine timing. So yeah, hello, everybody. Happy Friday. I'm so excited to talk about all of the things today. There's a lot, as always. I cannot believe that this is the fourth one of these already. I had originally said this, like when I conceived of this, which happened to be on the Capricorn New Moon on January 2nd. I was like, you know what? I'm going to do it for the month of January. And if it's fun, if it's working, like maybe I'll keep doing it longer than that. At this point, like I'm basically addicted to doing it. So yeah, I see these continuing for the foreseeable future. So thank you so much for your interest and all of that. Yeah, so let's see, what else? 1,000 subscribers on my page. Holy moly, that's insane. That's absolutely insane, considering it was like 4 weeks ago when I had like 80. And that's basically crazy, like I've said many times, like it's like a time warp where it takes you, a year to get 80 subscribers and it takes you 3 weeks to get 1,000. And it's like, how does that happen? How, universe, law of attraction, readiness, all of those things factor in. And basically, like, bottom line, it's divine timing, like it's the right time for all of this to be coming together. So it is. And the process of like the 9 or 10 months of building up to 80 subscribers was so enriching. Like it was such a humbling learning experience of like actually building the skills that it takes to do this. Like, I feel like I maybe thought you just like show up on the YouTube platform and like, bam, bing, bada boom, like there you go, you're doing it. And there's so many skills, so many video editing skills and all the things. Not to mention just like making good content in the first place. So yeah, it's taken me a while to like dial my skills. Wow, that's so cool. Hello from Holland, JJ. Where are you guys? Like everybody, if you want to say. It seems like from the time zones of when people watch my stuff, it's like there's so many people watching overnight to me here in the United States. So yeah, that's really cool. Sin City. Yeah, that's awesome. So 1,000 subscribers. That's a milestone moment, personally. And as far as YouTube is concerned, for those of you who don't know, there are certain thresholds that you have to meet on your channel before you're allowed to apply to monetize or like share the ad revenue of the ads that are getting played on your videos. And so YouTube requires that you have 1,000 subscribers and 4,000 hours of watch time. And it's just so crazy how fast both of those. It took me forever to get 1,000 hours of watch time. And then it's like these last few days, it's like 500 hours a day of people watching the content that I have on my channel, which is mind blowing. It's an upgrade in my physical reality that I can only attribute to the stars, the lining up of the stars and the energy and all of the cycles that we're going through even right now. And as I was preparing for one of the topics this morning, we're going to talk about is Venus turning direct in Capricorn. Hello, Bettina in Florida. So we're going to talk about Venus turning direct in Capricorn, and that is an energy that has felt very personally impactful. So I've spent a lot of time like contemplating there and feeling into that for myself. And I feel like the bottom line of, I guess, like, we'll just call this the beginning of Venus turning direct in Capricorn. We'll just get into it. Yeah, I feel like the bottom line of that energy is essentially an upgrade to our own sense of self-worth. And I feel like I've definitely gone through that these last 6 weeks of Venus being retrograde. And really, I started working with this energy when Venus was initially approaching its first conjunction with Pluto. So this was like all the way back in November. And I have 2 videos on my channel. One is about Venus conjunct Pluto, which again, I did that like, I want to say in December, maybe like right before it went retrograde on December 19th, it came conjunct with Pluto. So that was the first time. And then it went retrograde. So it like technically did make an exact conjunction again just a few days later. And then it went all the way back to 11 degrees of Capricorn. And that's where it's basically at right now. It's slowed down at 11 degrees of Capricorn. And now it's stationing direct tomorrow, I do believe, January 29th. Saturday. So, I mean, adjust for your location on the planet. That's so cool. Yeah. So now it's at 11 degrees of Capricorn and it's going to move back forward across Capricorn and will make another conjunction with Pluto. That one, I want to say it's at the very end of February, but I don't have the date. I should have looked that up. I know the date is in the second video I was going to mention. So I have 2 videos on this energy. One is Venus conjunct Pluto, what that entails. Oh, yes. Maddie is right on top of it with the video links. So yes, Venus conjunct Pluto video, and then Venus retrograde video. And so both of those I think would still be super relevant. And I realized I haven't introduced Miss Maddie since the very first time I did this. I seem to always forget. Maddie is my creative assistant. She helps me behind the scenes to basically make my stuff look as polished as it is. Like a lot of that is her. So yeah, she's like awesome for my own personal sanity and helping me out with all the things, as you can see. So that's Maddie. You'll see her in the chat a lot. So yeah, those 2 videos, I feel like I got into a lot of depth on all the archetypes of Venus and Pluto and Capricorn and what all of that energy feels like. But like I said, like that Venus conjunct Pluto in Capricorn, which is basically like a 3-month long experience because of the retrograde that's like right in the middle of that. It is an upgrade of our self-worth. It is the Pluto aspect of Pluto also being in Capricorn is like everything in our life is a mirror for who we are and the energy that we carry. And that mirror of our relationships, our professional setting, our home life, our family, everything that we manifest in our life ends up being a mirror for the energy that we're carrying. So one of the themes through this time is having our self-worth reflected to us. And I really get into that in the Venus conjunct Pluto video. So if that's something that's like sounding resonant, definitely check that out. But here today, I want to tell a little bit of my own story as far as like, yeah, that's exactly what's been happening. Like since November, when Venus first entered Capricorn, and then all of this process back and forth, it has brought up so much around like, what is my energy really worth? What is my time really worth? And not in like an arrogant kind of way, in a realistic way of life and like time on this planet is finite. It's not forever. It's not something that you get to like do over, like yes, reincarnation, but you have to start from the very beginning. And that's definitely a lot. Can we get 48-hour days? Dude, if anything, like time is like speeding up, and I have a floof in my mouth. It's pretty much always with 4 animals running around. Yeah, time is speeding up to where it barely feels like it's a 24-hour day at this point. So yeah, it's definitely an interesting time to be alive in general. And these last couple months, like what's happened for me is that has shown me areas where it just feels very heavy. It feels like like not worth it. It feels like I'm bumping into things and structures in my life that I built for myself through choices that I made, things that I signed up for. And then I run into it during this time. And it's like, I just don't want to do that anymore. I feel like I'm putting my energy in and there's no return. There's like a finite amount of energy that I get to spend in this life. And I don't want to waste a single cent of my energy. I want to budget it and put it into investing into the things that really, truly matter to me. And so prioritization, I would say, is basically what's happened, where I feel like it's also, because we're talking about retrograde periods, we're essentially talking about like a very internalized energy of reflection and contemplation and doing all of this reprioritization like inside of ourselves. So like when I say like my life basically looks completely different, technically on the physical like 3D on paper version, my life looks exactly the same. Nothing technically there has changed yet because I haven't taken all of this processing out into the physical reality yet. That's more what happens after the planets turn direct. And we're going to talk about that. But during these last 6 weeks of Venus retrograde, and especially these last few weeks of Mercury retrograde on top of that, it's like I have energetically freed myself from old priorities that no longer felt like I was getting my bang for my buck kind of thing. I've like energetically set it down. Like one example, not super specific example, but one example was I had this weekly task that I was doing and I dreaded doing it every single time I did it, but I did it because I felt like I had to. It was my responsibility. It was my obligation to do that. It's my job, quote unquote. And right around the beginning of this year, so a couple weeks into Venus retrograde, I just like had this snapping point of like basically coming face to face with my belief system compared to how I was spending my energy. Because on one hand, I believe that I'm supposed to be following my emotions like they're my guidance system, and I'm wanting to walk the path of most fun and the path of least resistance. And I could feel very clearly that this task is full of resistance. I flat out dread, like sick to my stomach, dread doing it. And I'm like, why am I doing that? And so I really like stopped for a second and didn't take for granted that this is my responsibility, so I have to do it. And I like really sat with, why am I doing this? Like, yes, I understand on the surface, I think it's my responsibility, but I also know that I got a thing with taking responsibility for stuff that's not actually my responsibility. So that's something I'm working on healing. So I know that that's a trap I can fall into, is feeling like I have to because I'm responsible for it, but I'm also just really a little too good at taking responsibility. So I really sat with it and came to the conclusion that the only benefit that I was doing it for was like for other people. Like it was for them, it was for their benefit. Like there was nothing in it as far as like what I thought was important. Like my value system and what I want to accomplish in a day, like that chunk of time didn't add to what I'm trying to build, like the Capricorn side of like, what is your ultimate impact that you're trying to make on this planet? What is the legacy that you want to leave behind? There's a million mountains in the world, maybe not a million, that's an exaggeration, but you can't climb them all in physical, like reality, physical time and space. So you have to like prioritize and pick which mountain are you going to climb. And basically, like, I feel like I've gotten really clear, mostly thanks to that Venus retrograde lately, but gotten really clear on like what my value system is, what matters to me, what's important. And the clearer I got on what my values were, the heavier and more burdensome this particular task felt, to the point where I basically made a deal with myself where, like, for one thing, throughout the month of December, I had basically stopped doing the task, right? Okay. But I was not doing the task. And then I was guilt tripping myself over not doing the task. So I was still very energetically like wrapped up in the task itself. And so the dread of like, I wasn't even doing it and I still was having to deal with like the dread of it and the guilt of not doing it, what I thought was my responsibility. So like it was a whole process of untangling all of that. And so for like a month, I didn't do it and I felt guilty. And at the beginning of the year, I made this deal with myself where I was like, you know, how about you keep not doing it, but you also don't feel guilty about that? Like, how about we just say, like, we're not going to do it. We're not going to do the task for the month of January, and we're just going to see what happens, right? Like, just, you're already not doing it. So, like, just stop guilt tripping yourself about it. You would think that it wasn't like such a process to get there, but it was. So that was the beginning of this month. So I haven't done the task in like 2 months. And 2 months ago, I would have like been appalled to think that I would just like drop the ball on this task for 2 months and just not do it, just, you know, abdicate my responsibilities, just shirk my responsibilities. How irresponsible of me to not do my task. That was me 2 months ago. And now today, I'm like, you know what? I think I did that task way longer than it even needed to be done in the first place. So I don't feel so guilty about not doing the task. And it's not important. Earlier on, like a couple months ago, I had it in my mind that it's this important. And so I must do it. And now, not doing it for 8 weeks, I'm like, no, it's not important. In the grand scheme of what I can spend my time doing in a day, not important. I can do so many other more important things. And so the root of all of that change and all of that evolution and freeing me from this task that was so dreadful to begin with, it happened because of that, like the first couple of weeks of that Venus retrograde, where I got really, really clear on what's important to me and what matters. And like, you know, not all that glitters is gold. So doing something because it's valuable, like define that value. Don't for a second take for granted something's valuable just because on the surface it is. Like, you know, like the teacher in grade school who's like, no, show your work. Tell me how you got to that answer. Because I know for me personally, when I like go digging around in how I've defined something's value, I find all my own personal limiting beliefs. You know, like I find that, yeah, I do indeed, again, have this other example of like, I have an overactive sense of responsibility. And here it got me again. And so that was like one example that came out of this Venus time in Capricorn in general, but especially the fact that normally Venus spends about a month per sign. It takes about a year to go around the zodiac. It only goes retrograde once every year and a half. And when it does, it basically ends up spending like 3 months in that sign. The last time it went retrograde was, let's see, it was like May and June of 2020. And that was in Gemini. So yeah, it's a big deal when Venus goes retrograde. And then here we are with like Mercury retrograde at the same exact time. But we're going to get into that, I think, more next week. Yeah. So anyways, so the other piece that came out of more the retrograde energy, this was like another, like just main theme, kind of like the upgrade to our self-worth that was happening under the surface. And I feel like Pluto was really a key player in that. And so still is. Like we haven't completed that cycle. Venus doesn't get to Aquarius until March 6th. So we still have, you know, over a month of this energy playing out. But the Venus retrograde, the question that came to me a million times a day throughout the whole thing, and this is basically how I framed the Venus retrograde video, was, is it really worth it? Is it really worth it? Is it really worth it? I just ask myself that about everything, like every single thing. I'm like, is this worth it? Is it valuable? Not all that glitters is gold. And prove to me that something is really valuable. And how do you decide if something's valuable? You know, like that's a process all by itself. Is how do you define value? And so this has been a time of, well, I guess I'll back up a step and say, for each of us individually, it'll look a little different as far as how it's playing out, because we each have our own birth time and then rising sign. So like Capricorn is in a different house for each of us. And wherever house this is all happening probably says just as much, if not more, about these values and these questions that you'll be asking like in your own life. So I do recommend like looking at where does Capricorn fall in your chart? Like what houses is it in? And Venus in those houses would be an interesting place to go research wise. Like Venus transiting 6th house, or, you know, whatever house you have it in. It's a little bit of a Google rabbit hole to fall down. So many rabbit holes to fall down when it gets to astrology. But is it really worth it? Every action always plays out the way it's supposed to. Imagine knowing the future events for one's life and others. That's a... sorry, I've just got distracted reading up in the comments. Yeah, I do want to just add real quick. Thank you so much for bearing with the poor video quality. It's less my camera. My camera definitely isn't great, but it's also the internet. My internet sucks. And so to stream takes a lot of internet, and I don't have a lot of internet. Like, it's not even available for my area. So we're making do, and that's very Uranus and Taurus of us. So we're gonna power on. La la. So yeah, is it really worth it? And that came out of a situation that happened the very first or second day. I'd have to look at what day of the week the 19th was. Yeah, so that happened the second day of Venus retrograde, this little story, which is just funny as I look back on it. It's the saga of the Christmas cupcakes. And it was like, basically what happened, the short version of the story is a customer at my grocery store showed up to pick up the cupcakes that she had ordered for her kids' Christmas party at school. And no, Scooby. And when she came to get them, they were not there. They were not in the back where they were supposed to be. So the manager who was on duty at the store calls and is telling me, this is what happened. What do I do? And I'm like, oh my God, like they're really not back there. And so it was like a whole back and forth moment. She eventually leaves. The cupcakes were not there. Thankfully, her party's not till later in the afternoon the next day. And so I could come in the next morning, do the cupcakes, and have them ready for her to pick up when she comes back the second time. So we were at least able to fix it. But it still led to a whole spiral of like basically chaos around like, where did the cupcakes go? Because like first I go to the cake decorator like, hey, did you make these? And yes, she did. She put them in the back. She knew exactly where they were and what they looked like, and they are not back there. So where would they have gone? So then we're tracking down in the journal in like the point of sale system, like looking back through transactions to find like, when did the cupcakes leave the building? Like I felt like a freaking detective, like trying to track down the saga of the Christmas cupcakes. Like, where did they go? You know, we've never had this happen before in like 4 years. That like, where did the cupcakes go? This is ridiculous. Because when you put it in the back, you put the order form on it. It's taped to the physical container. So like they had her name on them. So when you go in the back, you know whose order you're trying to get. So we also thought, we called her back after she left. We're like, somebody else must have picked them up, maybe, you know, like they came and they were like, hey, do you have so-and-so's order? And we went back there and we got him and we gave him to the other person. Like maybe somebody else picked him up. She then was like, my poor manager, she then got her whole life story about she's divorced and her husband doesn't pay child support and on and on. There's no one else. There's no one else who's going to be picking up these cupcakes. There's no one else who can like help her with that kind of a task. So that was like a whole conversation. So anyways, like long story short, it was a mistake. It was like a simple mistake in the moment. Basically, they got given to the wrong person. And the whole moral of the story was like, at the end of the day, in the moment of when the mistake was made, she didn't understand like why the order form didn't make sense with like this person who's picking up her order. This isn't what she wanted, but like, okay, whatever, like we'll just scan it anyway and send her on her way. If she had flipped the order form over and like asked the lady like, hey, is your name blah, 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 the woman would have said no. And they would have known like, this is not your order. So her order was still back there. And it was still in the back. Like basically the employee gave her the wrong cupcakes. And the funniest part was that the person who made the mistake was also the manager who was on duty when the woman came to get the cupcakes, and then they weren't there. So she was the one who had to deal with the bulk of the stress of the whole situation. So that's basically what happened. But the night that it happened, like when the lady comes to pick up her cupcakes and they're not there, thank you for bearing with me. This story really does have a point, I promise. It was almost an immediate guilt spiral for me personally. Like as a recovering people pleaser, I have very high standards for meeting customer expectations, and for a customer to show up and they've placed an order, we took their order and they came to get it and it's not there. I was instantly like beating up on myself basically, and guilt and shame and embarrassment and frustration. Like, how did this happen? And a little bit of anger mixed in there. And it was very much my old momentum. And it just like kind of took over like almost instantaneously. I didn't really recognize it for like at least an hour, maybe two, of like kind of sitting in that uncomfortable, this does not feel good. I am really bent out of shape about this woman not being able to get her cupcakes when she said that she was coming to pick them up. And all of a sudden, like 2 hours into it, this just like opens up, this whole new dimension of reality opens up in my mind. And it's like, is this really worth it? Like this right here, where you're giving, like, this is basically my higher self, I think, talking to me, like this right here, where you're giving up your inner peace to chase down the culprit who effed up the cupcakes, and to be in this tizzy. Like, is this really worth it? And that was the beginning of me asking myself like 25,000 times a day, is this really worth it? Because instantly, no, like, no, I'm twirled up in cupcake drama. No, you are absolutely right. Like, this is not worth it. Like, it's okay. Right. And at the end of the day, like, she didn't need them until the next day later, and I got to fix it and like all of that. But it's very interesting, like how quick that old momentum can take over, and we can get all flustered about basically trying to control things in the physical reality, and we're unable to. Like, you know, at that point, there was literally nothing I could do about it. And I was still sitting there kind of just fuming, and just, it did not feel good. It was very stressful on the inside to be beating up on myself like that. And all of a sudden it opened up. Is this really worth it? Really? Cupcake drama? That's what you're going to spend your inner peace on? Seems like a pretty small reward for such a big price to pay. And that is going to stick with me, I think, for the rest of my life, because I gotta say, I have like chilled out a lot these last 6 weeks. Like, let go of a lot of self-imposed responsibility and obligation that I have been wearing maybe for lifetimes. And I feel like I've let it go. Like, you know, life's a healing journey. It's going to take the rest of my life and all of that. But yeah, I just, it's so fun to even go back and like look at videos from 2 months ago, because I feel like my whole frequency is like different now, because I like, that's the main difference, is that I chilled out. I stopped sweating every single little detail, like trying to control all of these things in the physical. And it was such a progression of like, it began with this Venus energy. Venus is also my chart ruler. For anybody else who's a Taurus rising, Venus is your chart ruler. So like this retrograde and time that it's spending in Capricorn is even more impactful, because it's your ruling planet of your entire chart. So yeah, it's been quite an upgrade in my own self-worth. And to cap it all off, like, here we are with Venus turning direct tomorrow after this 6-week process. And 6 weeks ago, like, my channel was just little and I was doing it and I was loving it. And now there's just more people listening. And it's amazing, because that's ultimately what I said, like back to the Venus conjunct Pluto and Venus retrograde videos, both kind of centered around this is going to be a time of basically every person that we meet reflecting our sense of self-worth, the good and the bad. That we could have experiences where we get shown that, you know, these are your limiting beliefs, these are your negative behavioral patterns that you're still kind of playing out sometimes. Scooby, she's on duty, so, you know. Scooby, no. Thank you. But in addition to being shown like our own limiting beliefs, we're also shown our value and like where you're already standing in your power. And it just kind of feels like where you've grown in the past, like as we are on this spiritual journey and we heal and we work on ourselves and we work towards like reintegrating our shadow pieces and we become a more whole person. And we're doing that all the time. And this Venus retrograde period comes around and it is like a kind of a status check and a reflection point of where have you come to. And so the good reflections are something that I acknowledged in those videos, but like definitely looking back at those two videos, I wasn't feeling that. I was definitely way more bracing for the hard parts of like being shown where I'm still standing in my own way. And really, I would say the experience was way more the good side. But again, also, I was reading through my journal the other day, kind of looking back through how these energies have progressed. And right before the channel just kind of like exploded, there was this exploded. I have 1,000 members, 1,000 subscribers. To me, that's exploded. So, you know, carry your own definition, whatever works for you. But right before it did, there was an experience where on one of my videos, the Elizabeth Holmes video, there was a person who watched it who did not like me, like personally, did not care for my energy at all. And they took the time to write a very detailed comment on the video, explaining to me the issues with my energy. And that was a fascinating experience. It was like a turning point in my life because like 6 or 7 months ago, maybe 8 months ago, I had an experience where like within a couple weeks, I got a few of like similar style comments, like just really negative feedback, like attracting hateful energy. And it doesn't happen very often, which is amazing, right? Like that's definitely not the norm. But at the same time, when it does happen, rephrase, when it did happen, like back 7, 8 months ago, it basically devastated me. Like it was such a knock to my center. Like my very core was like pushed off of my soul's path. And it took me like a whole process to regain my balance. That was like getting hateful comments 8 months ago. This person, I think it was a guy, it doesn't matter. This person who left the comment there at like the tail end of December, this unfolding was all like that last week of December. From the minute that I read their words, I was overwhelmed with sadness for how bad, like I'm like about to cry right now because like how bad this person must feel on the inside to write words like that. Like, oh, it just hurts to think about like how much pain they're in. And in that moment, in that very first moment, there was nothing but love for that person. There was nothing but, I believe that people get brought to us for a reason, and that sometimes like our spiritual path comes out of hate, comes out of anger and jealousy, and like really toxic emotions can give rise to a spiritual path. So, I mean, they did not like me. They made it very clear. And so it was almost instant. This, like, I read their hateful words and I just understood that like I'm benefiting them. I'm serving their spiritual path by providing this material for them to come closer with their own anger, to come closer with like, dude, if you think I'm too happy, I think maybe the issue is that you're not happy enough. And that's obviously my own opinion. I could be wrong, but I also tried to like educate this person that like you're spending your hate on me. Yes, like you're doing that, but the universe can't hear that. The universe just hears attention or no attention. And right now you're like shining your full energy on me. And I appreciate that. I appreciate these comments that you leave on my work that spurs my work forward in the YouTube algorithm. You know, I got people who love my stuff that barely ever comment. And here you are, like taking the time to leave too, is how many they eventually left. I think they eventually got the point that I'm like, you're only helping me. Like in the grand scheme of like driving my content forward to see more people on YouTube, like you're really just doing me a favor. And otherwise, like, I really just hope that you can rendezvous with some content that you love. Like that's ultimately all I said back was, you know, that's a fair point. Thank you. And have a lovely day. And they just, yeah, they weren't having it, but it didn't knock me in my center like at all. Like the two comments, both times, all I felt for this person was compassion, and like literally spent a considerable amount of time that week just sending them energetic love, just conversing with their angels and their spirit guides, and like just pouring my love into them and wishing for them to rendezvous with that feeling through any means that they can possibly reach. And who knows what that did, but for them, but oh my God, for me, it was huge. It was huge to get to see that, like, look, I received hate and I didn't fall apart. Like, holy crap, that's brand new territory, let me just say. Yeah, that was such an incredible experience to realize that, like, you know, divine timing says that everything that's happening is happening exactly as it should be. So if somebody shows up and they have hate for me, I'm going to trust that I'm still serving their highest good. I'm going to just trust in my own goodness enough to let me know that their highest good's being benefited. They wouldn't be here right now if their highest good wasn't being benefited. So I don't have to worry that like they're mad. They're getting what they need, and that's all that matters. And so it's just like, it feels like it was such a turning point, because literally days later, that North Node in Taurus video just, there it goes. And bam, there's 1,000 people on my channel, and wow, you know? But I really think I needed to go through all of that time, because like I said, like 8 months ago, it rocked my freaking world to get a hateful comment online from some random person that I've never met before. You know, like that was enough to throw me off base. Like I wasn't ready. I wasn't ready to be opened up to a wider audience, because yeah, unfortunately, when you put yourself out there, you're going to get all kinds of reactions. You're going to receive people's reaction to you is really none of your business. And this is something that I've practiced knowing for years at this point. And yet 8 months ago, somebody like hating me or being, you know, frustrated or provoked by my energy, like it just melted me. I freaking hated that. And now it's like, maybe I've internalized it enough to, I don't know, on some level understand that, yeah, like people are getting what they need. And whatever that is, like, not my business, not my concern. My concern, and this again goes back to the Venus retrograde and Venus in Capricorn in general, my concern is, what mountain am I trying to climb with this life I'm living? And every day I want to climb the mountain. I either am climbing the mountain or I'm resting to allow myself to climb the mountain some more. And at this point, I'm very clear on what my mountain is, what it is that I'm trying to do. And the clearer we get on our values, the easier it is to make daily choices that line up with what it is that you're trying to do, what's most important. So yeah, let me pause there and see if there are any questions around Venus retrograde. I guess I do want to add one little bit more since we are specifically talking about it turning direct. So it's slowing down at 11 degrees of Capricorn, and it'll begin moving forward or direct again on the 29th. So that's tomorrow. So now that it's turning direct, like retrograde in a sign creates this cycle where, you know, back in November, December, we lived through Venus going through Capricorn the first time. And then December 19th to January 29th, we lived through basically Venus going backwards over those same degrees that we had just lived. And so it's like hindsight is 2020. Like we revisited all of the things and kind of got a new perspective on them, understood them at a deeper level, learned some lessons along the way, readjusted our priorities, yada, yada, yada. We are essentially different people now, like 6 weeks later, now that, you know, the first time that Venus went through 11 degrees of Capricorn, that was two months ago. And now we're there again. And we're going to go through 11 through 30 of Capricorn again and go through the Venus conjunct Pluto again. And we're new this time. And we get to meet this energy as the new version of ourselves, if that makes sense. Like it's just like, I don't know if you guys can witness inside of your own behavior that like the choices we make on a daily basis, and not even just the choices, but the way we feel about the choices. Like back to my example of I spent a month not doing the task, but I felt shitty about it. And then for another month, I didn't do the task, but I felt okay about it. So like, it's such a progression. And now here we are, like all of that progress later. And now we're repeating this cycle of energy of Venus and Capricorn, and it comes back down. Venus and Capricorn is an alignment of our value systems being Venus and our great work, what we're here to build in this life, our legacy, like getting serious about what was even the mission that you came forward to do. So aligning our value system with our everyday life, building that great work, that's what Venus and Capricorn is all about. And this last pass through, now that it's turning direct and moving forward, they say when like a planet ends retrograde and then turns direct, kind of like what we talked about last week with Uranus turning direct, it's like now the energy moving forward, it's like you can really move forward. Like literally you can get momentum going, new opportunities come in. Speaking of new opportunities, Venus is not conjunct. Venus at 11 of Capricorn is trining Uranus at 10 or 11 of Taurus. And so Venus trining Uranus is about like sudden changes, sudden opportunities. So the fact that it's making that trine, like that's where it went back to, was to be able to make that trine with Uranus almost exactly. And now it's going to move forward again. Like basically expect sudden changes, sudden opportunities, and opportunities around what? It's kind of, again, going back to like, where is Capricorn in your chart? Like mine is in my midheaven is in Capricorn. So like the beginning of my 10th house is like 16 or 17 degrees Capricorn. So this retrograde has gone from like the middle of my 10th house back to like the middle of my 9th house. And now it's going back. I also have my Neptune at 9 degrees. So it's almost coming back to my Neptune. And now it'll go forward through the end of my 9th house and the beginning of my 10th house. So the fact that like this time has given rise or birth or whatever to me doing these live streams, to my channel turning into what it's turning into, like in front of my eyes, day by day, moment by moment. It's freaking nuts. Yeah, like that makes a lot of sense, because in my chart, we're talking me aligning with my own truth, me speaking my truth, me like putting myself out there, sharing my ideas, all of that, like being wrapped up in kind of that 9th house of pursuit of higher education and higher knowledge and consciousness in general. Our spiritual path is very linked with the ninth house. I have a ninth house stellium. Basically, as I understand it, my spiritual path is my job. So now, like, that's where this Venus is, where that's basically what I'm realizing is like this mountain that I'm climbing is my spiritual path, like me living out my own journey of healing my spirit and my wounds and my own shadow work, and doing all of that is what will inevitably like give birth to whatever else is meant to come from me doing my own spiritual path. Like, I don't know what the end picture looks like. I have a version in my mind, but who knows what's really going to happen. Usually when we really open up and go with the flow, like, it's way better than anything we could have imagined. So yeah, best to just leave our options open on that one. And then Venus goes back through, like, that Pluto at the end of Capricorn is sitting in my 10th house. So like that Venus conjunct Pluto is in my 10th house of my public reputation, my legacy, my career, like, again, my great work. What is it that I'm ultimately trying to create? So all of this that I'm talking about around my time and how I'm investing my time makes a lot of sense, where I'm reprioritizing my spiritual path to be most important. And that means knocking a few other things down in priority level. And like, that's going to ripple out in terms of readjusting my life in general. But all of that is ultimately to make way for whatever it is that I'm supposed to be creating. And again, as I understand it, that's coming from my spiritual path. It'll just naturally unfold. So yeah. Yeah. Any questions? Oh yes, the schooly journey. Yeah, that is coming along. Like, it's one of those things that it has to happen energetically first. So there's like a process of readiness and an energetic pre-paving, and the physical obtaining the bus feels very close, like within the next couple months is where it feels right now, but it'll unfold in its time. And yes, like, I am so excited to share that journey. I don't know what that looks like yet, but because my goal is to buy like just a school bus that's like probably in commission somewhere right now, like working, fully running, and rip out the seats and fully remodel the inside and turn it into my home on wheels so that I am mobile. I have a passport, so anywhere I can drive and go wherever and live in this bus. That's my next stage of evolution. That's like I'm in the caterpillar, like in the cocoon stage right now. And when I come out, when I set sail on my bus, that'll be like the butterfly stage. So yeah, there's that. I feel like there was a question up here that I wanted to chat about. So the question is, do you think that astrology has an effect on someone with bipolar? And so anytime we step into a realm of like true psychology, like talking about bipolar disorder, I mean, that's like a defined, I don't even know what it's like, syndrome, or I think they call it a disorder, which is just a little disrespectful in my opinion. But yeah, so like, it's like full-blown psychology, and I am not a psychologist. So I do like to just lay that out. That being said, I have been diagnosed with bipolar a couple times in my lifetime. And I have some thoughts, like, just for me personally, that I'm more than happy to share. But again, you know, you got to like keep your own BS meter running and do your own research and find what resonates with you, because I am not qualified to give anybody advice on this subject. But for me, personally, I think, well, like, the way I understand bipolar is that it's extreme mood swings, basically, where you go from mania to depression very quickly. And the mania is intense, meaning your energy's fast and maybe a little irrational, illogical, like you're really bouncing around. And it's usually very uncomfortable. It's a very unsettled energy. And then the depression end is hopelessness, despair, shut the curtains and stay in the bed for weeks. And you just don't know, like when you're going to swing from one end to the other. It's easy to be provoked into one end or the other. That was my experience. Was I was extremely reactive to the energy around me. And so I felt like life kind of yanked my chain, and depending on what was going on around me, either yanked me into the mania end or yanked me into the depressive end. And then like, if I'm in the depressive end, it was like every little thing just stomped on my head and like pushed me down further and like just got me all worked up all over again. So that was my experience of bipolar. I was medicated a few different ways, and that for me was very uncomfortable. And again, I cannot say what anybody else should do ever. But for me, it was not a good experience. And yeah, so fast forward to what I now understand about astrology. When I look at my own natal chart, which again, I'm only going to talk about this from my own perspective, I have a lot of oppositions and squares. And those in general are very tense aspects. I also have some conjunctions, which can kind of go either way. Like it really depends on what planets are involved, if a conjunction is going to feel hard or like a blessing. All placements can be blessings, but when you don't know how to use your energy, when it's powerful and you don't know how to use it, it is all over the place, is my opinion. And basically, when you have energy that's like in those oppositions or in those squares, that energy is like coming head to head. So basically, when it's activated at the same time, and it is like coming head to head or like pulling you in opposite directions. And to me, I can see where different sides of that were creating the mania and the depression, for that matter, because eventually I'm so overwhelmed by all my ideas or all the possibilities or all the thoughts or whatever, that I just shut down into depression, because it's just too much. It's just too much to handle. So you just like go in a dark room, like you're basically overstimulated. And again, for me, it comes back to, I didn't know how to control my energy. I didn't know about emotions. I didn't know how to manage my emotions, how to understand what they were telling me. So of course it felt crazy and out of control. And like, I had no control. I was completely victimizing myself inside of all of that. Like, why me? And why do I have to be the one who has these crazy emotions and mood swings and on and on? Why can't I just take it in stride like everybody else? And now that I see my natal chart, I see like I do have like a lot of those oppositions and a lot of squares, where when I face a situation, I have multiple sides of my personality that react all at once. And this one wants to do this thing, and this one wants to do this thing, and that's connected to this, which wants to do this thing. And it's like, wait, what? Like, what am I supposed to do? Like, that's like instant mania. And so I still have rushes of like overwhelm, basically is a really mild form of mania. And overwhelm, I think, is just an emotion that like, you're not ever going to get out of that. Like, that's just a signal. That's like rumble strips on the side of the highway that let you know, take a deep breath. Like, learning to manage the emotions is about, like, I've talked a little bit in a different video about like anchoring our emotions happens in earth energy. So my answer to overwhelm is earth energy, like taking a deep breath, closing your eyes, emptying your thoughts, and to let go of that tension kind of on purpose. And if it helps to like go out in nature and do that, or do some yoga, or close your eyes for a quiet meditation, or like whatever works for you. But basically choosing that, like on purpose, choosing that, okay, yes, I do feel overwhelmed, but I'm not going to hold myself to a standard that says I have to respond right now. So the fact that I have all of these different sides of me that are wanting to contribute, I'm going to let that serve me instead of overwhelm me. Like the only reason that overwhelm leads to mania from my experience was I felt this pressure to like do all the things all the time right now, be perfect at all of it. And to put that much pressure on myself, then I'm wearing that pressure already. And then I run into a situation where I have all these different sides of me reacting all at the same time, plus the pressure. And it just like, I mean, I've snapped like multiple times in my early 20s was like really when it was the worst. Where it's just too much. It's just too much energy. And again, I think when your energy is really powerful, you have to know how to use it. And to get on a soapbox, not to get on a soapbox, the kids that have ADD, like the ADHD kids, where they're like, you know, this generation of kids, like they're just out of control. They're blah, 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 blah. I'm like, no, no. They're powerful. They're extremely powerful. Their energy is more powerful than any generation of children that's ever been born on this planet. And medicating them and punishing them for being so high energy is not the answer, is in my opinion. Like, let's teach them how to manage energy. Let's teach them how to manage emotions. Let's teach them how to use emotions as guidance. Let's let's teach them how to anchor their emotional energy in earth energy. Like that's ultimately the goal, is not to like get rid of the powerful energy, but learn how to use it. Learn how to ride those waves instead of like getting knocked off and beaten up under the current of the tidal wave, because that's ultimately what either mania or depression, it feels like you're just out of control. Can't do anything about it. It's like every little stimulation is, like I said, like just pushing you off your path. And to that end, I gotta say, like even that story just 8 months ago where those few comments of hate, I just, oh my God, like the depression that immediately pushed me into was severe and necessary. You know, like at the end of the day, a lot of healing came out of that time, reflecting in my own limiting beliefs that were being shown to me. Because at the end of the day, like every single thing that we attract, that's us. You know, this is me. This is my own self-hatred being reflected to me by the universe. That's what that hate is. And so how are you going to react to it? Well, 8 months ago, I went into a depression for like 3 days and finally talked myself out of it. Like, it's just a random person halfway around the world. Like, why are you in a depression for 3 days? I was. That's where I needed to be. But, you know, eventually, like I said, like coming to this place now where receiving hate, it doesn't feel like that. It feels like there's something stabilizing in my core. And honestly, I believe that that is learning how to use my own energy, that there's like a self-mastery happening through these cycles, through the retrograde cycles and the outer planets and what they're doing and on and on and on. It's all having its way with us. We're getting, you know, more and more whole all the time. And yeah, the learning how to manage powerful energy, it does take a while. Like you think about any tool that you would learn how to use. Like I said about my YouTube, like I thought I was just gonna land and be like, oh, cool, look at me, I'm a YouTuber. No, like it's a skill set that must be built. So just like every single piece of your natal chart is its own skill set. Like our energy is complex. Our energy is extremely powerful no matter who you are. So to think that you're just going to land and be a wizard with your energy, it just doesn't work like that. We get better as we go. And I think bipolar is powerful energy that is unbridled. It's not been tamed yet. And I don't mean broken. I don't mean the spirit of the energy is broken and you just take the energy away. I mean, you learn how to channel that tension into creativity. You learn how to channel the overwhelm into really taking advantage of being able to see something from 6 different sides and crafting a plan, crafting a solution with that multifaceted perspective. Giving yourself the time and space and giving yourself the grace to let your energy play out in whatever timing it's going to, instead of rushing yourself and demanding that you have to have an answer right away. Because I think when you do have like that multifaceted energy, it's not going to happen right away. The whole point is that instantly they don't agree. That's the point. And that is the point. That's why we came if you have a lot of squares, if you have a lot of oppositions, that's why you wanted those, was because the easy aspects don't give you growth. The hard aspects are where the growth comes from. So if you have a lot of squares, a lot of oppositions in your chart, basically you bit off a lot of lessons to chew in this lifetime. There's a lot of growth that can happen through that powerful energy and through learning how to manage it. And I think a big step for me personally in doing that, it feels like kind of the real turning point there in my mid to beginning to be late 20s, was self-love, worthiness, deservability, like learning that I am good, that I am lovable. That changed everything. That began my ability to give myself grace, to cut myself some slack. It began with loving myself and feeling worthy of that love. So it's a whole process. I think, hello. Yeah, I think there's a lot to it. I do hope that helps for anybody with bipolar or any kind of mood disorder. I think there's a lot that can be learned from having really intense energy if you can figure out how to work it. Like, it's a powerful machine, and the more we practice, the better we get at our skills. Maddie is putting in the chat as well a blog post on the deservability treatment. So this was a Louise Hay product, I do believe, from one of her books that I went to therapy in July of 2016 because I was a mess and falling apart, basically, literally. And within a couple minutes of landing in this therapist's office for the very first time, meeting her, she hands me this deservability treatment. She's like, I think this is what it is. And I start reading and I was like, oh my God, yeah, that's what it is. That's the problem. I don't believe I deserve love. I don't believe I deserve good things. I am full of limiting beliefs that I believe that I'm ugly and I'm stupid and I'm like not lovable and that I'm harsh and mean and bitchy. And I had all of this in my identity. That's who I thought I was. And so, yeah, I didn't love her. She's not lovable. And so that was like a whole beginning. That was July of 2016 when she handed me that deservability treatment, which is, I wrote a whole thing about like the story because it is a fun story. And I tried my hand at writing my own deservability treatment. So that's in there too. But yeah, so she recommended that I read that out loud to myself in the mirror once a day. And I did it like 2 or 3 times a day for like 2 months because it felt so good. First, it felt miserable, and then it felt so good because I did start to believe it. And that was really my first experience with affirmations, and really just repetitive like brain training. So like, it's possible to change your beliefs, but they didn't become beliefs overnight, and we can't change them overnight. So it's like repeated exposure to the same ideas, preferably every day. You can rewire your beliefs. And within a couple months of reading that deservability treatment to myself, I still remember the very first time I was looking at myself while I was saying it. I had it a little bit memorized at that point, and I was smiling. And I saw myself smiling because I believed it. And I was like, wow, you look so pretty. That was the first time in my whole life that I had ever, like, not like, oh, your makeup looks good or your hair looks good or whatever. Like, I legit thought I looked pretty. And that was the first time in my life that had happened. I was like 27 years old. And that was a turning point. And that was like 2 weeks into reading the deservability treatment. That was kind of the beginning of my daily self-care spiritual path, yada, 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 that I'm still on today. So yeah, deservability treatment, it's huge, huge deals. Spent my life taming my energy. Girl, me too. And I personally believe, like, no matter how long it takes, it's kind of never over. And as soon as you get it tamed, as soon as you can like hold it, that's when the fun training begins, right? Like, that's when the mastery begins. Like the difference between training a brand new horse who just keeps bucking you off, like just throws you off into the fence, like painful, just throws you off every time you try to get on there. Finally, you can stay on the horse. That doesn't mean that you're like going out to like Western style jumping competitions with your trained horse and like, being all masterful and elegant. No, like you can just stay on the horse. So there are so many levels to like really using that powerful energy for what it's for, and like mastering the flow of it and just being in control of your flow. And there's like nothing more delicious than that. But you got to stay on the horse before you can train the horse to do all the cool tricks. So learning to sit with the intense energy, like that's definitely not the fun part. And that's where like I've had so many thoughts of like wanting to work directly with children who are in that stage of they have powerful energy and they have no idea what to do with it, because my heart goes out to them. I felt so alone inside of my mental health issues that were long. They lasted a long time and it was extremely dark. It was exactly what it needed to be. But I do think that, I want to be out there in an example of telling the story that like having powerful energy is not a bad thing. It's not a curse. It's just we have to learn how to use it like a blessing, and that transformation is possible. So yeah, thank you for asking that. Yes. I hope we see more people be taught their love language and be able to do the same for others. Yeah, what are your guys' love languages, by the way? If anybody wants to share that in chat. And Maddie, if you could like grab the link for the love language quiz for anybody who isn't familiar. That is a free quiz. I believe there's like 5 defined love languages, and you answer questions about like, would you prefer your partner, brought you flowers or sat next to you on the couch and held your hand? And like the difference is like one is a gift, that's a love language, and then the other is like quality time / physical touch. And so, yeah, like answering all of those questions, it basically ranks your love languages by your most preferred to your least preferred. And you guys, you have no idea. Your comments are such a blessing to me. My love language, like by a landslide, is words of affirmation. So when you leave comments on my video, you are just expressing this love that just lands right in the middle of my being. And I really, really, really appreciate that. So yes, there's that. What was the original question that you just answered? I think maybe the bipolar stuff. Yes, thank you, Maddie. The question was, does astrology have an effect on someone with bipolar? And really, I would open that up to like kind of mental health in general. I mean, I know there's a lot of different types of manifestations of things out there that can happen. So, I don't know about like all the way across the board, but yeah, when you have powerfully tense energy, meaning there's a ton of potential there for growth and evolution, it also is a freaking crazy untrained bronco when you're little. And then you go through puberty and your hormones kick up and it just gets worse. And now you're in your early 20s and you're like in adulthood, and now you're like on your own and independent, whatever the F that means. And like putting all this pressure on yourself to have to know oh my God, like it was dark times, but I'm so glad I went through it. I'm so glad I survived it. That was questionable at times. Because yeah, that intense energy, it can be a real bitch to have to live through those moments. And that's where like one of my most favorite mantras that I've absorbed in these last several years is emotions are temporary. When I feel hard emotions, negative, nasty feeling emotions, that is the first thing I tell myself, is that this is temporary. This is not going to last forever. So that for me, I've practiced it to the point where it's basically a bridge up onto what I call the observation deck, where I can basically like look through the little binoculars on the observation deck into the emotional energy that's moving through me, where essentially I try to be the awareness around the emotion, not identified inside the emotion itself. That's been really powerful because, like Abraham Hicks teaches, emotions in general are our guidance system, like our own personal guidance system, telling us like when you feel negative emotion, you're going the wrong way. When you feel positive emotion, you're going the right way. And emotions are the direct result of our thoughts. So when our thoughts are pointing us in a destructive direction, we feel bad. And so like learning to manage your emotions is a lot about learning to manage your thoughts, learning to like practice your focus and point it towards things that feel good on purpose, you know? So like making a gratitude list every day, or, you know, this is another fun one where like basically you write down the highlight of my day yesterday was this. It was the highlight because of this. Like you basically write down the story of what was the best thing that happened to you yesterday. And you spend a little bit of time in your journal, like milking that best experience from yesterday for all it's worth. And the idea behind law of attraction is the more you focus into something, the more of that you're going to get. So it's something that like every day it just gets a little better and a little better and a little better. So this question is, what do you do when you have high energy? How do you manage it? Does that have some symbolism? So maybe you can add a little bit about what do you mean by high energy? Because yeah, I agree. That's a very good question in general. High energy, I'm going to interpret it the way I think you might mean it. But if you want to add some more, we can definitely continue that. So high energy, how I would describe it. So, okay. So when I have high energy, like I can feel it like viscerally buzzing in my body. Like it's very distracting for one. It's hard to do anything with the outside world because the energy on the inside is so all consuming of my attention. Hello. So that's one thing. And I will say, like just in general, when I start to feel that buzz, I get up. If I'm sitting, I stand up. And if I have really high energy, I'll put on music and I'll dance. Like basically, if the energy is present inside me physically, like it is buzzing my body, then you have to flow it. You have to. Like you need to go flow that energy and it wants to move. So until you do that, you're just like a little ball of nerves. And yeah, that's no fun at all. So that's probably my best advice. And I'll do that like at least a few times a week where my energy, like usually because I'm excited about something these days is my most common experience with this like high buzzing energy. And it's like my stomach will get all tight and like it's like literally moving inside of my whole core. And turn on music and let your body move. And 15 or 20 minutes of that, and it's like I still feel good, but the body like isn't tense. That tension is gone. It like lets that energy move. And that's ultimately like, you know, learning to manage high energy, learning to manage powerful energy. It's like you have to learn, what does it want? I think about it like, you know, what does the monster want? What do you feed the monster? Like it's not a monster, but that's what it'll turn into if you don't feed it the appetite that it's looking for. So that's one thing, is like feeding your monster the right appetite of things. And that really depends on like what your energy is. Like for me, those oppositions that I have are Gemini and Sagittarius. So like every single day I have to learn new things and I have to talk about what I've learned. I've learned this, and talking about what I've learned can be writing it in my journal, or it can be talking to you guys or whatever. So that's for me. Like I cannot go a day without learning something new and talking about something that I've learned. Like those two activities are required every single day for me to manage my energy. And so it's like, you kind of got to look at like your chart and figure out like, what are those signs wanting? Because when you have that powerful energy in a group of signs, a handful of signs, basically those are going to need your attention every single day. That energy, like if you have dogs, like you can't just not take them for walks. You can't just not take them outside. Like like a racehorse. The racehorse wants to be ridden. The racehorse wants to go run on the track. So if you have heavy, powerful energy, you need to get it out and exercise it like every single day. So when somebody asked me here recently, like on my YouTube channel, the like description or whatever, the first thing says I'm a professional rester, that's what I do. And that's basically what I do. And I would consider rest to be like a loose description of energy management. Rest and laying down and sleeping is one category of energy management. It requires a lot of sleep for me to do what I do on a regular basis. I take a nap almost every single day because like literally like cutting the connection in my mind, like with my mental energy, and like going to sleep and experiencing unconsciousness for like even just an hour and then waking back up, like I'm such a clean slate after that compared to before. I can get myself like really going. So it just kind of smooths everything back out. I also went swimming the other day, and getting in the water, it literally felt like my aura was like being cleansed, I guess. Like that's not something I don't think I've ever said, but like it also felt like the swimming pool itself was my own inner tranquility. And I was like swimming in my own inner tranquility. And I did that for like over an hour. So that was really nice to like, again, smooth out my energy and like give me that break from really high, powerful energy. Because that's really what ends up happening is when you have high energy, it like can blow your circuits. It can fry your fuses, and now your fuses are fried and now your shit doesn't work. So I've been there enough times. Like I've been burnt out and basically useless until I'm fixed, rested, recharged, whatever it is. So doing those kinds of maintenance on a daily basis or weekly basis, like coming up with what are those things that both feed the monster and like kind of put the monster to sleep, like kind of give you a break from that intense energy. Like it really does take both of those. I'm gonna read some comments because you guys are really telling me some stuff, which I love. Wow. Okay. So trying to find the balance between spiritual practices and real life responsibilities, getting so much revelation lately. That feels so much like this Venus retrograde energy in general of like, what are your values? And for me, my spiritual process is so valuable to me. So it does have me like really reevaluating my priorities on everything, basically. Like any amount of time that I spend is now under scrutiny. Like, is this helping me towards like whatever it is that's like truly important? Or is this something that's just like taking up my time and not helping me do what I came here to do? So yeah, I would imagine like with Venus retrograde and like I said, Mercury retrograde these last couple weeks, like it is an intense time for reflection and coming up with what works best for us. What is the day-to-day processes and practices that will help us do what we came here to do? And that's why I call myself a professional rester, because energy management is how I do what I do. Like it is the main job that I have. I don't call myself a content creator. I call myself a professional rester, because every ounce of what I'm doing, like even this right here, is really energy management in disguise as content creation. Like me talking about what I've learned and what I know and all of that, like that's exercising that Gemini Sagittarius that wants to get out of the barn and run around. And you guys sitting here just makes it that much more fun, you know? Also, growing outside of the box of Christianity, getting courage to own my truth despite judgments amongst a very fundamental extended family. Yeah. So this is big energy. Like what you just said right there, even if you don't have a Christian background or a religious background at all. Like I didn't grow up in religion. And yet I am going through like that exact same thing. And it reminds me of Uranus opposite Chiron, which was an aspect that existed from like, it was like 40 years of like 1960 to like 1988 or something, 1990, thereabouts. Like a 40-year aspect, which is very rare in astrology to have something like that. But because Uranus and Chiron, because of the way the speeds that they both move and retrogrades and all of that, they kept this opposition for 4 decades. And basically what it means, so if you're born during that time, we all have this same energy of Uranus being like our most individual self and our truth and all of that, and Chiron being our most sensitive wound and pain and like our fear of rejection and all of that. And so basically what that opposition boils down to is you feel this intense pressure to be your individual self, but there's also nothing more terrifying. But the more you cower away from it, the more you feel like you need to be your individual self. But the more you lean into it, the more it's terrifying. So then and it's just like, that's one of those oppositions that like it impacts almost everybody on the planet at this point, a good big chunk of us anyway. So yeah, that whole concept of having the courage to own your truth, that's something that like I feel like a lot of people can probably relate to, and I know I sure can. And that again, for me, I mean, I think I'm still very much working on this. Like even at this point where, again, it feels so weird to say I have 1,000 subscribers on my YouTube channel, and I still have never posted anything on like my personal Facebook page, for example. And that has like all of the people who know me in real life, basically, like they're all on there. So posting on my personal Facebook would be like revealing that truth to everybody who knows me in real life. And I've never done that. Just didn't do it. I just came over here and started doing what I'm doing. And I'm like, people who resonate, they'll show up and we'll hang out and it'll be great. And so like, even as you come to terms with like owning your truth and owning your authentic self, that doesn't always mean that you have to go back and like have an all-out conversation with people from your past to explain it to them. Like if anything, I would say that's probably counterproductive and would be better to like move forward inside of your authentic energy and find people who resonate. Don't go back and like try to build bridges with people from your past unless it feels really natural and organic to do that. Otherwise, like people will show up, you know, like decide who you are and then open your heart to whoever the universe wants to bring to put in your life who is for your highest good, you know, like sometimes that's going to be nobody. Sometimes it's just going to be you. And that's for your highest good. And then other times, lots of people are going to show up all at once, and that's for your highest good. So kind of moving with the ebbs and flows and not forcing yourself to tell your truth to anybody. You don't owe your truth to anybody. So there's nothing wrong with just kind of like keeping certain things to yourself if you don't feel secure sharing it with a certain person. Like that doesn't diminish you owning your truth, like in totality. Interesting. I'm going to read this question. I don't know that I have an answer for it. My love interest and I have our natal Venus retrograde. What do you think the effect of Venus going direct could impact our energy connection? I don't have a specific answer to this, but I do want to come back to the idea that with Venus retrograde in general, and especially like as Venus comes back into that, conjunction with Pluto, everybody in our life is a reflection of our self-worth. And in a close-up romantic relationship is often where we're handed some of the hardest pills to swallow about our self-worth. So I do just want to say, like, it's a good time for anchoring ourselves deeper into the idea of, you know, we attract people's behavior from them. So if there is, you know, rocky times, or if there are things that come to the surface, especially like I said, as Venus comes back in conjunction with Pluto, like we're gonna go through it all again, but we're new now. So we're gonna get to see how we respond from this new place. And yeah, so it's possible. It's totally possible that it could be a little rocky as Venus goes back through. But again, just because the outer circumstances are rocky, Venus is our ability to find peace inside of ourselves. So if anything, like we're kind of getting to see how much we've grown And that might look like your partner saying something that previously would have really triggered you and would have really like knocked you off your path. And instead they say something that's kind of in that vein. And you notice yourself going like, wow, okay, so I must still have some stuff here. And I'm gonna get in my journal about that. And like you just instantly know that like this isn't something to even be worked out with the partner. This is only being reflected to me because this is something that's going on inside of myself. So that's something that's like coming up in my own relationship. Speaking from personal experience, yeah, like these retrograde times in general, it's such a deeply introspective time that it can be, especially like when you like share space with someone, like you're cohabitating, like they're introspective, they're going through their emotional processing, they're in their own depths, they're like doing their thing, like they're supposed to be like managing their emotions, but on the outside they just seem like down or withdrawn or whatever. And now as the person like sharing this space with them, what that looks like for me personally is feeling the down energy that is present and consciously making sure that I'm choosing to not take that personally, to not just jump to the conclusion that this is a signal, that this is like a representation of our relationship, that this is like there's something wrong with the relationship and we need to sort it out. So I think it looks a little bit like boundaries inside of the relationship. And I had this conversation with one of my clients who's like very, very empathic, as am I. And we were talking about like basically when your partner is in a funky mood, just because you can feel that doesn't mean that you have the right to ask them, hey, what's wrong? You know, like if they wanted to tell you what was wrong, they would be talking to you about it. And just because you can feel it, like and I'm a life path 6 and so is this person. And so like the downside of life path 6 is that we can be a little bit over nurturing to the point of like smothering to death. So learning boundaries is like kind of the whole point of the whole life path 6 thing, of learning like to be there when people ask for your help. And when they say like, hey, I want to talk to you about this, like you're right there with your undivided attention. But just because you can pick up a lot of truth of what they're experiencing from their vibration doesn't give you the right to like go poking around in their business kind of thing. So like that is so freaking hard. That's so freaking hard to practice. But I'm trying really hard to practice that because yeah, like these retrograde times, like we're all processing our shit. We're all in that space of like having to kind of come to terms with, I'm doing really good in this area. I'm not doing so good in this area. Like we're facing our things and doing the work that we're supposed to be doing. And it can be really difficult to not take somebody else's energy personally, and to just be accountable for your own energy, to, like do your own emotional processing and make sure you have your own like stable footing under you before you try to go and like work out anything inside of the relationship, because ultimately the relationship is two healthy individuals create a healthy relationship. So that's something that I practice inside of my own relationship. I am not qualified to give relationship advice at all, but I do try to like take responsibility for my own emotions and let her take responsibility for her own emotions. And that is easier said than done when you are cohabitating and you are having to like energetically soak up what they're saying to you and you don't get to talk to them about it. It's a very weird sensation, but it's so important. Yeah. Oh, Maddie put the link for finding your life path number. I am brand new to life path numbers, and it was huge to learn I was a life path 6. That gives you an overactive sense of responsibility and that you are just here to like love and nurture. And basically your path is like to embody unconditional love. And that the shadow side of that is that you find your value in nurturing others, which means when you get out of balance inside of yourself, you can basically need to nurture other people even when they don't need it. And that's how you can smother them to death with your love. And done that so many times. So yeah, it's like, try to just answer the questions that are asked and leave everything else that you can sense energetically, leave them to their own devices, you know? It comes back to what I said about, I'm trying to practice like not taking responsibility for everybody's everything. And yeah, just because I can feel it energetically doesn't mean that it's my problem. And that's probably like one of the biggest lessons for a lot of us, as far as like, if you're anything sensitive to energy, learning how to feel the energy that people are giving you without like automatically being sucked in to it, and like taking responsibility and like helping them fix it, and like, oh, you're in a bad mood, here, let me help you sort that out. Like, it's not your problem. Like, that's a life path 6 like hardest thing to get through your head, is that you're not responsible for everyone's everything. You're responsible for you, and that's all. And man, it took me a while to learn that. I feel like this is where it's really funny that I had 3 little brothers. So by the time I was 4, I had 3 younger brothers, and no twins. They're just single pregnancies. My mom and dad like really got on top of it when they were ready to have kids. And so by the time I was 4, I had 3 of them running around. And by the time I was like 5 or 6, I loved school. I wanted to be a teacher. And basically, I would like force them to play school with me. And that only worked for like a minute before I learned that like, you basically can't force anybody to do anything. And yeah, like those, my brothers being so close in age to me, they definitely taught me a lot about smothering people, and like just how to interact with others in general, that like you can't help somebody who doesn't want to be helped. And again, that took me a really long time to learn, even though I started at like age 4 learning that from my brothers. So yeah, I think I need like a little bathroom break, and then I'm going to come back and we're going to talk about the Aquarius New Moon and the Sun conjunct Saturn. So I learned my lesson last time. I'm just going to take this off, not unplug it. And yeah, I'm going to say like, let's see, it's 32 right now. I'll be back in like 3 minutes. Okay. If you can't stay, no worries. Thank you so much for being here. Catch the replay. I'm here every Friday. Like and subscribe, all that stuff. But for you that can stay, I'll be back in 3 minutes. less than 3 minutes. How about that? You know, because I gotta go to the bathroom. I can't make it 2.5 hours without using the bathroom. I drink a lot of coffee, you guys. That's just kind of unreasonable. I do, let's see. Oh, you guys know how to make a girl feel special. Oh my gosh, I know. I sat here for 90 minutes and my hips especially were like, you want me to do what? Yeah, not good. Oh my goodness, but there's nowhere I'd rather be. You got to know that. I was thinking about that. Like, oh, I just love doing this so much. I try to remember to stay present inside of the moment. Otherwise, like I get going and it all goes by so fast. But otherwise, like I try to like really just be present to how much I love getting to do this. So again, thank you so much. Seriously, you guys are amazing. Thank you. Thank you for being here. Okay, so we is going to move over to Aquarius. And let us see here. I got notes. Okay, so dropping all my things. So here we have like kind of a clump of energy. So we have the Aquarius New Moon happening at 12 degrees of Aquarius, and then Saturn is right around 15 degrees of Aquarius. So the sun and the moon both technically are pretty close to conjuncting. Is that a word? Conjuncting? Conjuncting Saturn. So all of that is kind of this big clump of energy. So we're going to try to like kind of sort it out here. The first thing is, this took me forever to pick up as far as like new moon and full moon. I don't know why it was so hard, but it really did take me a second. So no shame if that's you too. But new moons are when the sun and the moon are together, and full moons are when they're opposite of each other. And I really had to like paint a picture in my freaking head to get that in there of like, okay, so the moon is almost nothing because it's behind the sun, basically. And the full moon is full because it's as far away from the sun, meaning opposite, as it can possibly be. So like its light is as bright as it can possibly be. So that's how I remember that. The Aquarius new moon is taking place on Tuesday, February 1st. And because that's happening at 12 degrees, and then Saturn's at 15, the conjunction of the moon and the sun will happen kind of between the 1st and the 4th. So all of next week is like this big clump of Aquarius new moon energy. And really, they say new moons play out for like 6 months at least, until like the Aquarius full moon, which would happen then in Leo season. When the sun was in Leo, the moon would be opposite in Aquarius. That's when the Aquarius full moon will be. So for the next 6 months, whatever intentions we're setting here at the new moon, those then are manifesting and unfolding, and we're evolving and growing into the person who is going to live that life of like what you intended. So that's very exciting. New moons in general are a very exciting time of new beginnings and new intentions. Also with this particular new moon, it is the Lunar New Year. So that's like just a little fun fact that the Lunar New Year is the second new moon of the year every year. So this is the second one in Aquarius, making it the Lunar New Year. So happy Lunar New Year to anybody who celebrates that. I'd never heard of it. So there you go. So Aquarius, we talked quite a bit about Aquarius last time, but I do have some quick notes as far as, so Aquarius, and especially relevant to the new moon and setting intentions and all of that. So like Aquarius represents our hopes, wishes, and dreams for the future. So that's just kind of nice to think about as far as like this Aquarius new moon being a time of like basically making wishes to the universe. Like if you could have a few wishes, what would they be? Like, I don't know if you guys are like that, but I do stuff like that in my journal all the time where I'm like, I would wish for this. I would want this. I'm a big dreamer, huge dreamer, big fan of the dreaming. And you know what? Like, a lot of that stuff ends up happening. So I would just highly recommend, especially anytime it's a new moon, to like really get in a journal or like a piece of paper or like, you know, whatever. The act of writing it down is important, just in the fact that like when you are writing, basically the thought has to stay in your head longer. You are like slowing down the energy to a pace where you can translate it into words, which takes a really long time. So that's like forcing the energy to be focused and slowed down, where you can like really absorb it and use it and work with it. So it's good for training your energy, like what we were talking about before with high energy. Also, it's like when you look at it from a law of attraction standpoint, the act of staying in a thought for at least 17 seconds or 68 seconds, like you're actually moving the universe. The universe moves in response to you spending that dedicated time and focus on that thought. So the act of writing it down just really keeps you focused in that specific thought, so that you stay there long enough so that the universe can respond to that concentrated energy. So writing it down, whether you do it on a regular basis or just at new moons, like it's a pretty good ritual to at least try on for size. Okay, so also with Aquarius, it represents, like we talked about, the future, very futuristic technology. So for example, the last time Saturn was in Aquarius, it has like a 29.5-year orbit, I think. And so the last time it was in Aquarius was 1991 to 1994. And I don't know if you know this, but that is when a lot of like big online tech companies were born. And by the end of the 90s, those original online entrepreneurs that had started, I think that's when Amazon started. Maybe somebody could Google when Amazon was founded, but I'm pretty sure it was in that time. And if not, it was in Saturn and Capricorn. So kind of the same thing of like, what big thing are you trying to build that has never existed before? And like, here comes Bezos, like inventing this online bookstore that has every book. And now it's Amazon, the world's largest online retailer, yada, yada, yada. So Saturn and Aquarius, like what, or Aquarius in general, like futuristic, like technology that doesn't exist yet, new ideas, new. Amazon was founded July of 94. Yeah, there you go. Stock pumps, man, what a crazy time that was. That was more like 2000 when the tech bubble burst. The late 90s of all of these tech companies that were basically undervalued is what they said. And so people bought in because it's undervalued, meaning like the stock price is cheap, but the technology is really cool and it's like going to change the world and it's like such valuable technology. So here, buy in. A bubble, makes a bubble, the bubble bursts, blah, blah, blah. And most of those tech companies didn't make it, especially the ones that started in the late 90s. It seems like the bigger ones who originally were the ones like riding that wave of like true ingenuity, like the ones who started in the 91 to 94 era, they pretty much made it through the tech bubble bursting in 2000. So it's like this Aquarius energy, there is a stroke of genius inside all of us. And Aquarius is an air sign also. So like there's a receptivity to it. Like air energy, I think about this like in human design terms. So like if you're not familiar with that, like hopefully this lands. But basically it's like air energy is like an open head, like where other people's ideas and like inventions like out there and like non-physical energy and like all of that, like it's all just floating around in the energy around all of us. And air energy is the part of each of us that can open our own mind and like receive an idea. And Aquarius is like not just an idea, like a stroke of genius. So that's pretty cool. Like Aquarius is a genius inside of all of us. And the more true we are to our authentic selves, the more likely we are to be able to receive like our own unique stroke of genius. If we're hiding from the world, if we're hiding our authenticity and burying it in layers of social niceties and living up to other people's expectations and fears about, you know, being rejected, and we're burying our authenticity with all of those things, we're also basically covering over our ability to like be open to receiving this stroke of genius. So it all kind of goes hand in hand, especially when we're talking about Aquarius energy. There's so much like individuality in that. It's like the side of us that knows like our soul is unique among every other human on this planet. There's nobody like you. So Aquarius energy is that side of us where we want to be our authentic selves. Like we really don't even have a choice. Like it takes a lot of social conditioning to get us away from being our authentic selves. And a lot of us go through that much social conditioning. So we do get away from our authentic selves. But it's like, when we're talking about Aquarius energy, it's a matter of like just seeing that conditioning for what it is, so that like one layer at a time, you can take it off and get back down into like, who are you on a soul level? What does your authentic self say about each situation you find yourself in, versus the conditioned response, the conditioned fear, the conditioned judgment, whatever you've picked up along your path and you're using, that doesn't really align with your authentic self. So that Saturn through Aquarius is like a 2.5 year transit. It moves pretty slowly through the 30 degrees of Aquarius. So it's kind of that Saturn in Aquarius is a bigger process of kind of lining up with our authenticity and receiving the stroke of genius that's waiting there for us. Like, it really makes me curious, like, what was Bezos doing from 91 to 94? I mean, I think when he founded Amazon in 94, I'm pretty sure he had like a backlog of like effort that he had done on the project so far. So I don't know exactly when like he conceived of Amazon, but yeah, like lining up with your authenticity and receiving the stroke of genius that's there. The other side of Aquarius that's really exciting is it's like twofold. It's like a two-step process where first there has to be a willingness to be alone. There has to be a willingness to like separate from others in general, where it no longer matters what other people think of you. It no longer matters if they want to support you. You like basically are developing this space inside of yourself to not care what people think. And depending on how much Aquarius energy you're working with and how much Leo energy you're working with, that can be easy or difficult. It just depends. Leo is the end of the spectrum where, I love how Stephen Forrest puts this, where we have the courage to let it matter what other people think of us. And Aquarius is the end of the spectrum where we have the courage to not care what people think of us. So we all have all 12 of them. We all have Aquarius and Leo somewhere inside of us. And depending on how much placements you have in both of those tells you how easy or difficult it is to not care what other people think. But yeah, like the first step is to be able to be alone. And that is to say, like, I'm going to be who I am, even if others reject me. And you have the courage to do that because you're not afraid of being alone. So there's like a certain skill in being able to be the loner, the one on the outside who can observe the collective. And that part of the process has so much benefit in terms of when you're on the outside, you can observe the inner workings of the collective. You can kind of look at things from a bird's eye view and see how it all works together, because you can come up with a lot of really interesting out of the box solutions when you're standing over there. When you're willing to leave the collective and be alone, you have a completely different vantage point from anybody who is still participating inside the collective. So the vantage point that it gives you, and you can come up with solutions from that vantage point. And then is the second part of the Aquarius archetype, which is now, like, Aquarius is a fixed sign. So it's fixed energy. The 4 fixed signs are Taurus, Leo, Scorpio, and Aquarius. So Aquarius is fixed air, and they each are fixed in their own way. Fixed air is about, I've done the work where I am okay being alone, where I am prioritizing my individuality above everything else. And then I'm able to stand back and see the world from a completely different angle. And I've come up with these solutions that I think would benefit the future of humanity. And now Aquarius is fixed around those solutions. they will take those solutions and they will implement them, and they will move forward and do whatever needs done to bring these things to fruition. Meanwhile, Aquarius also rules like our true community, our true tribe, friendships, and not really just like acquaintances. Like, it really irritates me when people are like, oh yeah, I have like 1 million friends. I'm like, no, you don't. That's impossible. Like, the people that you resonate with, like the people who feel like soulmate level friendships that are giving you something like for your highest good, not just someone that you know in the grocery store and you're like, oh, hey, how are you? Good. How are you? Good. Okay, have a good day. Like, that's not a friend. That's an acquaintance in my book. You know, we're getting into vocab lesson here, but so Aquarius rules those kinds of friendships, like deeply resonant friendships, where like basically when you are so fixed in your own solutions of like, this is the best thing that I could ever deliver to the highest good of humanity, you're fixed in that area, just like we talked about with the act of writing it down. When you're fixed in those solutions, you're going to attract other people who are also a fan of your solutions, basically. So that ability to be alone and be the loner and see the world from that perspective and come up with your own individual idea of like, what is the best possible future humanity could have, and then hold strong to those ideals. That's ultimately Aquarius kind of as a whole, but especially like as we're going through this new moon and this setting of intentions and new beginnings, it is time to make some wishes, like from that vantage point of standing on the outside, not trying to perform or behave for anybody, just looking at it with honest love and compassion for ourselves and everybody else to say, like, what would the best possible future of humanity look like? Well, I think love, like unconditional love inside more and more of us, that would be really nice. People knowing their own worth, that would be really cool. Mutual respect, because we all understand that like really we're just all extensions of the same source energy, that we're all interconnected beings and there is no actual separation between any of us. So we all just like love each other, you know, like, I don't know if that's going to happen in my lifetime, but these are the kinds of wishes that I'm sending out into the universe. So like you got to do the ones that make sense for you. But yeah, like looking at the world and like, what would you wish for the future of humanity, and to take that work seriously, because like I said, like the more fixed you are inside what you want, like the ideas that you hold in your mind, the more likely they are to manifest. And the more of us who are focusing in these areas of what do you want the future of humanity to look like, and pouring our love and our good intentions and like our own self-evolution, like wanting that for everyone and holding this space where we welcome everyone into their own self-empowerment. Like, that's what I want. And just like think about it so long, you get so excited about it, and then write a story in your journal about it, like spend some more minutes like focused in that area, and bring like the fixed nature of Aquarius is really helpful in that, in terms of like, take those ideas and run them into the ground, like build your whole life around those ideas, and like be fixed inside these solutions that you can dream and you can see them in your mind. Hold steady to those and they will become your physical reality. Like right now with Saturn in Aquarius and Uranus in Taurus, Saturn represents like the past, the established, like traditional way of doing things. And Uranus is very much the future, like really sudden changes and evolutions and strokes of brilliance and inventions and those kinds of things. So the interesting part is that Saturn and Uranus both rule Aquarius. So it's like on one hand, the Saturn like rules an establishment, like that's part of what we're talking about, right? Like when we change our sights and when we dream a new solution and a new version of reality, I mean, it's not necessarily going to happen with like a quantum leap where we just like come up out of our current reality and go over here and drop into this new one. It'll be a gradual change from where we are to where we want to be. And so how I see that playing out as far as like Saturn kind of being right in the middle of this new moon energy and a ruler of Aquarius in general is like, if you want to make real change in this world, there is a certain amount of understanding like the starting point, understanding even like where people are, understanding where humanity is as a whole. That's the cool thing about Aquarius energy, is like when the people who are really good at it, when they stand on the outside and they observe the collective, they have such an acute ability to be able to sense like where is humanity, like where is the vibration of the people in general, basically. And again, knowing from that vantage point, like what is the solution, what is the right answer. And I think I wanted to talk a little bit about overwhelm, which we did touch on a little bit earlier as part of the bipolar conversation, as far as like overwhelm can very quickly lead to mania if you don't check it and like, manage it, go for a walk, get up and dance, like do something with that intense energy that comes up. Because like when we're talking about, the future of humanity, those are huge concepts, obviously. And so to think about, making sure like, what are we going to wish for with the future of humanity, and what are we going to create it to look like, and what does it look like? Those are like huge, overwhelming questions. And I totally understand. And I think it's normal to feel overwhelmed. And if you do Tara Brach's process with it, as far as like the overwhelm is just the surface, and we swim just a little bit deeper under the surface, and the overwhelm comes from a place of like caring and wanting a solution, that makes me feel better. And it slows me back down to like, I really just care a lot about humanity. I care a lot about our future. I care a lot about our planet. I care a lot about the quality of life of human beings and animals on this planet. And because I care so much, I can get really intense when it comes time for like, let's daydream and let's come up with solutions, and like put a lot of pressure on myself as to like, what does that look like? So just something to keep in mind as we're doing the dreaming phase. I think overwhelm is really normal. And that if we can just remember that like, we're only getting overwhelmed because we care so much about finding a solution, and then drop back down into a space of like ultimately what I would call a Taurus vibe of finding our inner peace and relaxation, because we practice understanding that our inspiration flows best when we are relaxed, when we are at ease. The divine inspiration can come to us because it can only come through an open, relaxed, energetic, like an open heart, basically, open head. Like when we're covered over in the drama and trauma of our lives, like we're not open to receiving answers. We're kind of struggling in the questions. So yeah, that's a lot to ask for like any one individual, as far as like, what does the future of humanity look like? So my invitation to not get overwhelmed in the middle of that, and to dream anyway. It doesn't have to be perfect. And important to point out too, that again, the universe doesn't hear the words necessarily. The universe hears attention or no attention. So if you're dreaming, if you're like, picturing a love-filled future, and that's all the further specific you can get, you're still contributing to creating this. You're still holding that vibration of love. And that's ultimately all the universe is hearing. So yeah, it doesn't have to be perfect. We don't have to have all the details of like what the dream looks like in order to energetically like feel into it as much as we possibly can. I'm going to get in my chat just a little bit and just see what you guys are saying. Okay. Okay, so Billy says, yes, but my experience is that the collective wants no part of my great ideas. And that is such a good point. Thank you so much for bringing that into the conversation, because it is a very real piece of the Aquarius archetype that side of our energy is by definition ahead of its time. So the whole point of Aquarius energy is that it does not fit in. It does not fit in. That's like the futuristic side of Aquarius energy, is that like by nature, it is the outcast, because it is wanting a better future. It's like at odds with the establishment. Like we come out of Capricorn into Aquarius, and by the time we come through Capricorn, we are so sick and tired of living up to society's rules and like following expectations and following the rules and doing what we're supposed to do and blah, blah, blah. And then we come to Aquarius and we're like, yeah, I'm done. I'm done with all of that. And I'm going to go out the indoor just because I can, just because you're not going to tell me what to do. So yeah, there's like an inherent rebellion inside Aquarius energy. And like the whole point is nothing changes if nothing changes, right? Like it is so difficult to be the one who has the futuristic ideas that the collective wants no part of. That's isolating. And that is where we go back to like that very beginning step of Aquarius is like having the courage to not care what people think about you. That's like a very real prerequisite to being able to do any kind of real work inside Aquarius energy. And that's not easy, like, especially depending on what planets you have there, that's not easy to just not care what the collective thinks of you. Because if you think about it, it goes back to like our fear brain, and there is safety and security inside being part of the collective. So Aquarius, just like giving the middle finger to the collective, like you're risking death in the grand scheme of like our patterns of back through history. Like if they kick you out of the civilization and now you're out all by yourself with no help, no food, no water, no resources, none of that, like chances are you're not going to make it. So like we count on the collective for survival, or at least we did. And now as we're moving into the age of Aquarius, which is like a big slow process, what's going on and on for a very long time. But we are moving from the age of Pisces into the age of Aquarius, and it is becoming more and more prevalent to not be confined by relying on society and to make our exit and to stand on the sidelines and observe what's going on and to come up with those ideas even if they're not popular. Because again, nothing changes if nothing changes. The collective doesn't change, period. Individuals change. Individuals decide for themselves that I want something better for myself and the collective in general. And even if the collective doesn't want it for themselves, I want it bad enough for all of us. So that's what I'm talking about with that fixed Aquarius energy of finding what resonates with you as the most brilliant solution for the future of humanity, and then holding steady to those ideas even when other people don't get it. Because they're not going to. That's the whole point of Aquarius, is that you're getting a stroke of genius. Genius always looks like madness the first day, the first year, the first decade. You think about like freaking Nostradamus. I don't know if you're familiar. I wasn't until I read Dolores Cannon's books, Conversations with Nostradamus. But essentially, this guy was like an astrologer slash philosopher slash like spiritual teacher from like 1400s, 1500s, thereabouts. And he practiced his own meditation technique to where he essentially went into this dimension where he could see all of time. And he basically witnessed like the destruction of the earth. And he wrote like 1,400 quatrains, which are these little poems. And he published them in like these little riddles, like they're all like in code messages, because they needed to survive like the Spanish Inquisition or something like that. Like it wasn't, they were going to burn the material if he had like published this and said what it really was. So he needed to get it out there so that it would live through time, so that somebody in the future could interpret it. And so Dolores Cannon, like in the 80s and 90s, I want to say, she stumbled on to Nostradamus, like connected with him through time. Like she's in the 1980s or 90s, and she put one of her subjects into trance, and they went backwards into previous lifetimes. And basically the person was one of Nostradamus's students. And so through that experience, they got to know like Nostradamus from the student's perspective. And eventually they were communicating directly with Nostradamus. And that from his time in like the 1400s, 1500s, this sounds so far out there, by the way, but you guys are listening. So like, I don't know, whatever. I like it. I think it's cool. But anyway, so from the 1500s, he's sitting there in meditation, talking to someone in the 1980s. And he lived his whole life and passed away hundreds of years ago, before his original ideas, his strokes of brilliance were ever decoded, were ever understood and appreciated. He was 400 years deceased before that ever happened. And it only happened through Dolores Cannon's books. And basically she spent a few years going back and forth with Nostradamus, and they decoded and translated every single one of the 1400 quatrains. And she goes through in those books, 3 volumes worth, all of them. And as far as like how they actually came to fruition, like he said that these things were going to happen and they did. And so like blow your mind. But all of that to say, the collective, they're living in the past. They don't know. They don't know what the future looks like. That's the whole point of like, you have to get out. You have to let go of the collective to be able to stand on the outside, to be able to observe, to be able to see the future. The collective doesn't know. So basically, they can't judge. They can't judge your ideas. And really, like, we're not trying to share our ideas with the collective, I don't think. I think we're trying to share our ideas with other people who are out here standing on the sidelines, like doing the same thing we're doing. So like, Billy, like, you're in the right place right now. We probably like your ideas, you know, like this is a time of calling on our courage to sound a little crazy, maybe. Like that little spiel that I just gave you guys right there, like that's pretty far out there, you know, as far as like connecting with people through time and on and on and on. Like I fully 100% believe all of that. And I'll bet you if I were to like, you know, say this same exact message on my personal Facebook page, like with all the people that I know, they would come out here and they would take me to the mental institution. They'd lock me up. And they don't get it. They don't have to get it. I'm not telling them. I'm telling you guys. So it is, again, kind of coming back to that skill of like knowing where is the secure outlet for you to be able to express your truth, and you don't owe it to every single person that you ever meet. It's not, you're not meant to just resonate with everybody. Like find the people that you do resonate, where it does feel safe and respected and that sort of thing, to share your truth and share your ideas with those people. If they don't appreciate it, you're just not sharing the ideas with the right group. That's my 2 cents. That is another good point. Thank you so much. Talking about we're planting seeds in them, and that's a service. And that's something that I tell myself all the time, actually, is like, sometimes we plant the seeds, sometimes we harvest the fruit. You know, and what I mean by that is, let's say you do say something to someone and they freak out on you and they don't get it and they don't like it and they're mad or whatever. Like, you just planted a seed. That's planting a seed. It's not a very enjoyable experience per se. It's kind of like hard work. It's not super fun, on and on and on, but it has to be done, right? Like you can't harvest the fruit if you don't plant the seed. So sometimes though, you get to harvest the fruit where you say something to someone and they light up. They light up and they resonate so powerfully, and you just like changed their life with like this idea that you just shared. That's like picking the fruit off the tree and biting into it, and the juices run down your chin, and it's so delicious. It's, oh God, so sweet, so sweet. So sometimes you plant the seeds, sometimes you harvest the fruit. And when you're on your spiritual path, and especially if you want to have any kind of like a spiritual business, I feel like there's some of all of that. Sometimes we're planting seeds, sometimes we're harvesting the fruit. And both of those are part of the experience. Like, you know, most of the time we don't get to harvest the fruit from the seeds we plant, and the fruit we do get to harvest, somebody else planted the seed a long time ago. So there's no shame in either one. When it's your turn to harvest the fruit, let the juices drip down your chin. Like, don't even worry about the mess. Live it up, soak it up, enjoy it to the max. When it's your turn to plant the seed, meaning people don't like what you're telling them, they get mad, they hate you, yada, yada, yada. Like, you've planted the seed, and that seed is going to be watered and nurtured through other life experiences that are going to come along for that person. And someday somebody else is going to get to harvest fruit out of that situation because of the seed that you planted. So middle way, thank you so much for bringing that into the conversation. And Billy, I totally agree. Like in real life, like IRL, in real life, I other than my partner, I don't have real friends. So like, that sounds weird to say out loud, right? But I would say with honesty and no shame whatsoever that every single one of my resonating people that I have in my life right now, aside from my partner, are online. And most of them I've never met in real life. And that's okay. That's like the Aquarius side of it too, that technological side, that global civilization side where you don't have to be limited just to your little pond of people that you know in real life to be able to find like your soul tribe. You can go online and you can find them no matter where they live. So that's really exciting. And I think that's definitely like this, this Aquarius new moon like has a lot to do with finding our tribe. And again, I know like for me personally, like back in the day, I so badly wanted to like skip to that stage where I had my tribe and like blah, blah, blah. But, you know, at the beginning of the process, I didn't even know who I was. So like basically when you're standing in the collective and you haven't stepped, and this is where I was, like when I'm standing in the middle of the collective and I haven't stepped out far enough yet to even know who I am or like who my true self is. I'm right now just a reflection of the collective. And all I met were people who were from the collective. Like they were just everywhere. And I didn't like basically any of them. And then I realized like, oh wow, like I'm still, and I have a Leo moon, so I care a lot about what other people think of me. I practice, you know, like we talked about. But yeah, so not caring what people think and letting go and being alone and all of that, like it was definitely a process. Like it was multiple years of a process before I practiced my way into enjoying my alone time. Like that was a whole step of my journey, was that I physically was in pain being alone. Like I just couldn't handle it. I needed somebody else to be there with me. And that was leading me to a ton of toxic relationships because I was basically settling for anybody with a pulse. And now I'm in all these shitty situations, basically by my own making, because I could not be alone. And so that skill of learning to be alone, that was like a whole part of the process, which now with my astrology understanding, I know is like part of Aquarius energy. Let me see. Oh man. Yeah, so this one says, oh, that's so awesome. Okay, so this one says, I have this false belief left over from childhood that says if I'm not doing something for someone else, I'm being selfish and wasting time. And so this reminds me of an Abraham story that she tells it all the time. And when you've listened to Abraham content for 5 years, like there's only so many stories that she tells. So yeah, I have like basically all of them ingrained in my mind. Can't recommend her enough, by the way. She changed my life. But anyways, so she talks about like how self-care isn't selfish, essentially. And that really like when, like, let's say it's your mom when you're little. This is my own personal experience where you want to do something for yourself. And like, let's say you want to go play or you want to like, you know, hang out with your friends or whatever. And then your mom's like, no, I need you to do the dishes. And you're like, no, I want to go here and I want to do this. And she's like, oh, you're so selfish. And, you know, why can't you just do this and like be a part of the family and blah, blah, blah. Like, it's like, you want me to do what you want to do. So like, isn't that them being selfish? Basically, Abraham tells the story so much better than I do, but that's essentially the idea, is that when people tell us that we're being selfish, like almost always it's that person who is being selfish. And that's why they're telling us that. And then we are the ones that end up with that belief in our subconscious that like we're selfish if we ever do anything that's not for somebody else. So yeah, like that's a whole part of a healing journey as far as doing shadow work. And I would say Abraham, again, is brilliant for healing that in terms of realizing that like, if you don't feel good, you don't have anything to give to anybody anyway. So it's actually the most selfless thing that you can do, to take time for yourself and to prioritize yourself. There's this concept, I share it all the time, so if you've heard it, you hear it again, called selfish giver, where the whole idea is that you put yourself on purpose as your top priority. I did this a long time ago, and you hold to that, like, steady. You are your top priority every single day, all day long. You are your top priority. And you do that because you realize that, like, if you're not cultivating your own energy, if you're not cultivating your own happiness, then again, you have nothing to give to anybody. If you let your tank run out of gas and then somebody calls and needs your help, you have nothing to give to them. And that's heartbreaking when you truly do want to help somebody, or you truly do want to help yourself and you can't. Like, that reminds me of a story that one of my clients told me, where like, we were talking about these burnout cycles and selfish giver and how important of an idea that really is, especially if you are a giver, incorporating some boundaries around, you need to give to yourself first, and then any energy that's extra, you can give that to everybody else. And the more you cultivate your energy, the more extra you have to give away. So, like, in the long run, you actually end up giving more by giving to yourself first. But the story that she told was, like, she was, a very hard worker, very professionally minded, career minded, all of this. And she was going through these cycles where she would work really hard and then she'd, like, burn herself out and have to take some time off and, like, get better and whatever. Well, she just, like, kept doing that. Like, every time she would get better, she would just charge back into work and, like, not change a thing in her work practice. And I'm like, gotta say, I resonate with that. Took me a while to figure out, like, maybe I should work differently and then I wouldn't get burnt out. So anyways, it came around to that simple burnout, crash, rest, go back, like, that simple process turned into not just burning out. She manifested, like, an actual illness. She manifested Lyme disease. And she was, like, knocked out with Lyme disease, like, for the first couple years of having it, like, near death, doing all these experimental treatments and, like, all of that. And what happened in those first couple years, just so happens that her parents both pass away, and the ranch, their family ranch that had been in their family for over 100 years, was left to all the siblings. And basically, she was the only one that felt like we should keep it. And the rest of them wanted to sell it. And so that was, like, a battle where she was going to have to fight the majority to, like, figure out a solution to get her way in all of this. And she's in a hospital bed, and that ranch got sold. And she's still sick about it 30 years later. So yeah, it's like that. It's like when we run our tank out of gas, when the chips are down and it actually matters, then we don't have any energy to fight. Like, that sucks. That's, like, regret that she likely is going to carry into this, next lifetime with her, because she just is sick that she didn't take good enough care of herself to be able to fight when it actually mattered. So giving our energy away all day long to everybody else, like, it is something that I feel like a lot of us are conditioned to do when we're little. We're taught that, like, that's the nice thing to do. That's the polite thing to do, to, like, take care of everybody else, especially if you're the oldest sibling. I feel like you get a double dose of that. But eventually, like, yeah, you wind up in one of those situations, or enough of those burnout situations, where you realize, like, when I let my gas tank run empty, I have nothing left. And that doesn't let me do anything for anybody. And that's, again, it's just heartbreaking. So yeah, I hope that sheds some light, that selfish giver idea. So again, I think, so this one says, so it's like, when I'm good to myself, I have this urge to share or do something for someone else, but no one else wants anything I have to share anymore. And I feel like I resonate with that too. I have something similar in my own energy that, again, for me, goes back to my life path 6 thing, I think, was kind of where I found an understanding of this. But basically, like, I find a lot of my personal value, my sense of self-worth, in teaching and helping and nurturing and those kinds of things. And if you think about that, that means that in order for me to feel valuable or worthy or like I've done something good, I need somebody else to participate. Like, you have to, I mean, it's hard to teach if nobody's listening. It's hard to nurture if nobody's there feeling better as a result of what you're doing, etc. So what I would do then is like get in this place where I felt like my sense of self-worth was wobbly. I was unstable in my sense of self-worth. And so then I would go out and like try to teach somebody something and they're running away from me and I'm chasing after them. It reminds me of the Instagram thing where it's like, don't run away from the Lord. Like I'm chasing people down, trying to nurture them, trying to teach them stuff so that I can feel like a good nurturer and a good teacher so that I can feel worthy. And what I had to do for myself, and this again comes back to the selfish giver idea, is turn those powers on yourself. Like turn your nurturing on yourself, turn your teaching on yourself. And the teaching side, especially my journal, was huge for that. Like I said, I have heavy Gemini and Sagittarius energy that every day I need to talk about things that I've learned. And again, same thing, like, yeah, I was polluting every relationship I had basically by forcing them to listen to, I need to talk about this because that's how I'm going to manage my energy. And you need to listen because I need to talk about this. Like that's unhealthy and one-sided. And I was basically polluting my relationships with that. And so now I journal every single morning. I tell my story to my journal. Anything that I need to talk about because I need to manage my energy, I tell it to my journal. Or I make a podcast episode, or I make a YouTube video. And those fit the bill as well, I think, because I'm not forcing anybody to listen. If people want to show up at some point and listen to what it says, then great, but that's not why I'm doing it. I'm doing it because I want to say it out loud. And so, Billy, that may be something that you think about, even if you're not publishing podcast episodes, even if you're just using like a voice recording app and like recording yourself talking out loud, like basically you're talking to yourself. Like these interesting things that you want to share them with yourself. Say them out loud, even though nobody else is listening. Listen to yourself and get in that loop where basically you close the loop between you and your own energy management. You no longer need anybody else to participate for your energy to be managed. And that is where I feel like we can really get some stable ground under us, because when people don't want to listen, when they don't want to be participating, when they don't want to be nurtured, they're like, get away from me. Now you're chasing them and being like, let me hug you. Let me make you feel better. They're like, I don't want to feel better. I don't want you to hug me. Get away. Like, yeah, that's not good. And so you got to kind of take a step back too and think about like, why are we in that in the first place? Like people who don't want to hear from us, like why do we go forward and like try to share in the first place? And I think there is genuine excitement. Like, I think I'm understanding what you said, right? Where you're like, when I'm good to myself, I have this urge to share. And you're absolutely right. Like the better we take care of ourselves, the more we pour love into our own cup. The cup is only so big. You only need so much love. So when you put yourself at the top of the list, the flawed premise is that you're only going to care for yourself and never going to move it down the list. But basically what you're doing is, like think of like a champagne fountain. I've never seen one in real life, but like that's just what popped into my head, where like you have all the glasses in the pyramid and like basically you pour the champagne in the top cup and then it overflows out of that top cup into these cups that it's like sitting on top of. And now these cups are so full that they're overflowing onto the next layer and the next layer and the next layer. It's like that. You pour your love into yourself. Turn your magic back in on yourself. Turn your attention, turn your nurturing, turn your teaching, turn your all of it. Turn it back inward and close your loop with your energy management to where you can do it all by yourself. You don't need anybody else to participate. And what naturally comes out of that is that your cup, it gets so full that it can't help but overflow onto everybody else. And the other thing I'll say about that is loosening up when we turn inward and when we like make it the closed loop, then the overflow can come out in a more pure way where like you don't really need anything from anybody. You don't need them to resonate with your ideas. You don't need them to agree with what you're saying. And that's where something like making a podcast episode is perfectly suitable as far as how this energy is going to overflow out of me out into the world. Basically what I'm getting at is kind of like loosen the grip around who is it that needs to listen to you. Because as soon as you say nobody, You know, like when I started my podcast, nobody was listening. Nobody was paying attention for quite some time. And those were really interesting episodes to make because I was sitting in there by myself when I recorded it, and then I published it and nobody listened. So it's like, you know, as soon as you get over needing them to resonate with your ideas, like your own resonance with your own ideas is enough, then I feel like the people who do naturally resonate, like they will come up out of the woodwork. But as long as we need people to behave in a certain way, they just can't, because the whole point is like to be shown and proven in this lifetime that like we can't control the physical circumstances. We can't control other people. We can't manipulate the physical environment. The only thing we can control is our thoughts and our perspective and how we choose to focus our energy and spend our time. Those things are 100% up to us. So training our focus, training our brain, seeing ourselves in a more whole light, spending our time focusing into things that do help us resonate in a more positive feeling vibration, spending time doing that like on a daily basis or even a few times a week, like you're naturally letting your vibration rise over time. And the thing is, and I mean this with so much love behind it, resonating relationships, like to manifest that in your life, it is a very high vibration. It's an ecstatic feeling to be with someone in like a vibrational frequency where you're like going on the same wavelength, you're having a conversation back and forth where you're just in each other's thoughts and flowing and blowing and just like so good back and forth. Like the co-creation, it's exhilarating. So kind of basically what I'm saying, to manifest that into your physical life means you need to feel like that already. You need to feel exhilarated already. And so like basically how you manifest the exhilarating friendship, you make that kind of friendship with yourself. And that's where I say like talking out loud to yourself, journaling in your journal and telling your story there, validating your own voice and your own ideas. That is kind of how we get that stable ground underneath us. Let me see. You guys are so up in the chat today. I love this. The thing that's so demoralizing is that the voices are my family members. Of course, I've done so much work. Guess I wanted things to actually change instead of just being alone. And again, I'll come back to like, this is very much the Aquarius side, but the being alone is just the first part. Like that's really just the first step. And it's kind of like also giving me Pluto vibes, as far as Pluto is like a hell on earth. And it's not something where we get to have companions as we go through it. Something that you have to go through by yourself. And so it's almost like the path to get to your soul tribe is one that you have to walk alone, because you have to get into that like ecstatic relationship with yourself. And that's really only possible if you get to know yourself deep enough to love yourself and kind of like reform your patterns of behavior and thoughts into the person that you can love, and be working on that on a daily basis. Yeah, that's perfect. It's so much easier to focus on others. For me, it's been a call to nurture myself first, and that's okay. It is so much easier to focus on others, especially like depending on the upbringing that you had. Like I said, like I was 11 months old when my first brother was born. And by the time I was 4, there was 3 of them. So like it was a very chaotic start to life. And I feel like I carried that chaos inside of me until I was like 30. So it's about seeing that conditioning. And again, that kind of goes back in general to Aquarius as an archetype, is like, you know, inside of Aquarius, there's our true authentic selves. And then there's like the Saturn side of it, where there's the conditioned societal, like socially acceptable version of who we were trained to be. As Stephen Forrest puts it, like there's the real you and there's the trained monkey you. And the first step to healing this divide and like getting it all back into just your authentic self and like moving forward from that space is to recognize, what does your trained monkey look like? What does your trained monkey sound like? And for me, it's like that chaos and that sense of like, I have to work really hard to be valuable, and resting is lazy. Like that's that trained monkey. That's what mine sounds like. And that's the mentality that I absorbed in my childhood. And so, in the evolution of our soul on this planet, eventually, in order for things to like truly change, I think the biggest step, and this is again something that Abraham Hicks can really help you with if you're interested, is we have got to take responsibility for how we feel. It's nobody else's fault. It's a matter of us and what we focus on a regular basis. And it is possible to retrain our thoughts with continuous effort and daily momentum and a little bit of effort every single day, maybe like 1 more millimeter forward and then 1 more millimeter forward and 1 more millimeter forward. It may take you 10 years to go an inch, but the 10 years passes whether you're moving forwards or backwards. And basically we're either getting happier or we're getting less happy. Like there's really no like staying just still where you are. Like momentum, the law of attraction, it's building whatever you have going on. So either you're feeling worse or you're feeling better. And at any moment, like it's also Abraham teaching, like this is not like a college degree where once you have it forevermore. You either have it or you don't have it in the moment. The thoughts you're thinking right now in the moment, they're either helping you feel better or they're helping you feel worse. And the trick with all of what she's teaching is to learn to be aware of your thoughts and how they're making you feel. And if they're making you feel bad, if there's tension and stress and you're beating up on yourself and there's self-doubt or even self-hatred or anything like that, to try to pull yourself out of those thoughts as soon as you can. Like be that, put on some music and dance, or go take a shower, or go for a drive, or like change your setting, change your environment. If you're hanging out with a person and that's what's caught, get away from them. Like you do what you need to do to get your thoughts back into a place where it's helping you to feel better. And essentially the foundation of all of that is to take responsibility for how you feel and pay attention to it on a moment by moment basis. And don't let yourself pay attention to things that are only going to make you feel worse. And to me, it sounds like your family is in that category of they're only making you feel worse. And the thing with Aquarius energy, the strength of Aquarius energy is that you're not afraid to let go of anybody in order to be who you were born to be, even if that's your family members, right? So of course it's hard. It's like not something that just like happens overnight. I also believe though that like our family helps set us up for the evolution that we chose. So like if your parents were a certain way, like my parents, for example, like hard work, that was like the religion that I grew up with. Like a half day of work is 12 hours. That's a half day, because a whole day is like 18 to 20 hours. That's my dad. That's how he operates. Yeah. So that was what I grew up with. And at a certain point, I was working like that and not even thinking about it, because that's just what you do. You work hard, like blah, blah, blah. That's what you have to do. And I was miserable. And I hated, I would say, it's safe to say, both my parents, hated both of them because they made me like this and I fucking hate this. And eventually, like in that therapist's office, the deservability treatment, one of the lines says, I am not the limiting beliefs of my parents. I am separate from them and I can go beyond them. And so I think it's something along those lines. So that may be a good place to go too. Maddie, maybe you can put the link to that blog post in the chat one more time. Cause yeah, she just did. Yeah, the deservability treatment, like that's huge, to be able to believe that you deserve good things. Most of us weren't raised to believe that. Most of us were raised to think that it's really selfish when you care about yourself. And yeah, I really hope that the deservability treatment, especially, I think that's like a tool. It's a tangible, practical tool that you can take into your life like today. And like I said, like that was really the beginning of my spiritual path in general, was reading that deservability treatment out loud to myself in the mirror every day. And I will be honest, I cried the first several times I read it because I did not believe it. Not just didn't I believe it, but it was so far from being true that like I was crying because I was like, I have so far to go. I'll never get there. I can't get there. I'm just too far gone. I think I got there. I listened to what the therapist said, like that she's like, it's going to take at least 30 days. Like you need to do this in the mirror once a day for at least 30 days and see how you feel. And I felt so far from it right off the bat that I was like, maybe twice a day, maybe twice a day for me seems like a better dosage. So I did that like morning and evening. And then I started taking it to work with me. And when I would I really didn't like my job at that time. I was working at a software company. And when I would get like really looped up about something at work or whatever, I would like go into the bathroom, into a stall, and like not in the mirror, obviously, but like get that out and like just like kind of read it out loud to myself and like kind of like come back into, I deserve to have a good feeling life. Like to build that belief, it took me time. So yeah, like it's not a matter of like, were you born happy or were you born depressed? Like I felt for a long time like I was born depressed. Like I just wasn't meant to be a happy person. And then thanks to Abraham and that Louise Hay deservability treatment, I learned that our emotional base, our emotional average is actually just a result. It's just an average of the things that we spend the most time focusing on. So if you want to feel good, then focus on happy things and you will. And 6 years into that experiment, I can tell you 100% certain that works. Yeah. Oh, I love that. It says, amen. My mentally ill dad and mom were just surviving, and my role was to be the good girl and agree with them. So, like, so often, and I feel like this happens more and more and more, so often the child is actually the teacher that the parent is manifesting. Like, our healing journey as the child is what will teach the parent. It's if they're teachable, you know, some of them are, some of them aren't. And letting go of who is teachable, that's part of what we're doing here. But like, for example, I have a placement in common with my dad that's like, basically when you look at the synastry chart between me and my dad, we have these two planets like sitting at the same spot. And when you look at what does that synastry connection mean, it means that like in this lifetime, I am here to teach him part of the lessons that he signed up to learn in his life. So yeah, like I don't know that we've gotten to that stage in our relationship. I think most parents think it's the other way around, where the parent has to teach the kid how to be in the world. And I just personally think that's like really far from being true. I think the children are the ones that we could stand to learn from. So yeah, I think our parents, they didn't know any better and they were just doing the best that they could. And that's where, you know, like I said, it's been a whole process that I am still very much working through, both my mother wound and my father wound. That's a concept, if you've never looked into, that's really interesting, as far as basically we all have a mother wound. We all have a father wound. We were all wounded by both of our parents, that it's basically unavoidable. So whether it was really difficult and it was like something, yeah, horrible, or it was like just little stuff where, you know, my dad basically worked on the road. I mean, he traveled for months and months at a time and would come home for like 4 or 5 days and sleep the whole time. And then he'd leave for another few months. So like he didn't actually do anything to me, but he was never there. And that left a wound all its own. And so that left me very angry for a long time. Like, why couldn't I have a dad that was there, you know, that participated, that watched me grow up, that participated in me growing up? And when I got older and I had done some work like through Abraham's teachings and kind of taking responsibility for my emotions and all of that, letting go and blah, 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 like, you know, everything is always working out for me. If things happen, that's what's supposed to be happening. So I did some thinking on that. I let that marinate a little bit, specifically around this example with my dad. And you know what? He and I are so similar and we are so hot-tempered, both of us, at least I used to be, that had he been present, I don't know that we both would have survived. For me to even, you know, survive into adulthood, or for him to survive into his adulthood. Like, yeah, I think it would have been like an all-out battle had he been there. So to a certain extent, I've come to accept that the fact that I grew up without my dad was actually the path of least resistance. And in the grand scheme of his and I's relationship, it most likely had the best chance of surviving and thriving if we weren't together for the first 16 years of my life, because he was very bossy, and so am I. I'm very bossy and I'm very much autonomous and like in control of my own self. And I do not need anybody to tell me what to do. And he insisted on telling me what to do when he was there. And by the time he stopped traveling when I was 16, I was kind of over him. I was just mad at that point that he was just never there. And just that anger kept him at a distance and yada, yada, yada. And like only in these last few years, like where I've moved back to my hometown, have we started like rebuilding a relationship. And I think it's still possible that that could happen and that we could, you know, eventually have like a really nice relationship. But I think if we had spent my whole entire childhood like having all out screaming matches at each other, that never would have happened. So even though the path was very painful and I spent so much time missing him, and that missing him turned into fucking hatred, anger, just because I missed him so much, it hurt so bad, I think it hurt a lot less than if he and I had fought my whole entire childhood. So the path of least resistance, that's what that looks like. It's like, it doesn't look like ponies and rainbows and like everything was perfect. It looks like it could have been a whole lot worse. So I don't know if that helps, but yeah. I mean, that's it. Parents, they think they got to tell you what to do. They think it's their job to teach, and it's just not. She says, yeah. Oh, I shouldn't assume anybody's gender. I do apologize. Yes, it comes to light more too for me once I had my own kids, those wounds. Yes, my dad and I both had tempers. We butted heads also, but also understood each other the most. Yeah. I see, and I don't have kids. I don't know that I ever want kids. So I'm trying to do all this healing without the having the kids part, because yes, from what I've heard, when you have the little mini me's, it gets like so much easier to like understand the parent's side of the dynamic, and have compassion for like what the parent was going through. And so I've had to like try to craft my own interpretation of having compassion for my parents, even though I'm not a parent, you know? So there's that. But anyways. Oh, yeah. Strong Sag and Gemini axis here. Yep, me too. Back to the point that I accept that I need to be heard after so many years of penting up. You do need to be heard. If you have heavy Gemini, Sagittarius energy, you are meant to exercise your voice and share your thoughts and ideas every single day. But, and this is the trick that I had to learn to like close my own loop with my energy management, was just because you need to express yourself every day doesn't mean anybody else has to listen. So trying to find ways to express yourself, be that through podcasting or making videos or, you know, writing blog posts or, you know, expressing yourself, however that's comfortable for you, and doing it for the satisfaction of like getting it out of you, like using that to flow your energy. And like, for example, when I sit down to journal, sometimes like I do it every morning, and then sometimes I'll do it more throughout the day, depending on how I'm feeling. Like if I get feeling like really pent up and like there's just a lot going on in my head, or I'm having lots of emotions or whatever, I'll get in my journal and start like writing down, like, what is it that I'm feeling? Like, why does this feel so confusing? What are all of these different sides that are at play here? Like sometimes I'll just like do bullets, like there's this and there's this and there's this and there's this and there's all of these different random things that I don't know what to do with all this. It's just like an avalanche coming up all at once. And taking the time to like write it all down, and just kind of like my head at the end of that feels so clear and light. Like I was able to like get it all out of there and dump it out somewhere. So like being heard isn't the point, I don't think. The being heard part, that's other people's business. If it's the right place, right time for them to hear you, the universe will make that happen. But you expressing yourself every day, that's your business. And I totally support that. That like, yes, if you have heavy Gemini, Sagittarius energy, you need some kind of a daily practice where you're getting to use your voice. Yes. You guys, I think I'm caught up at the end of the chat. And this is officially the longest one of these I've ever done, but so fun. This was so fun. I feel like this was the best one as far as like, we definitely got off the rails a little bit, off the astrology, and we were definitely all up in the emotion management pieces, but hey, that's like mainly what I'm here for. That emotion management, it's a lifelong journey of figuring out how to harness your energy and how to train it to be productive and get something constructive out of it. So yeah, I can definitely resonate with the pain of feeling beat up by your own energy. And I mean, the only way that I've found to make it better is daily incremental progress. The time passes anyway, whether we're getting happier or sadder. And yeah, every day, a little bit more, a little bit more, a little bit more. Oh, you are so welcome, Billy. I'm so glad that you were here and that you shared. I think the way that you're feeling is, I mean, you saw in the chat, there's so many people who can resonate with that. And I feel like that's where I started in terms of like coming online with my spiritual journey. I was very isolated. Like how lonely I was part of the pain that led me to my spiritual journey to begin with. So yeah, I hope you hang in there. I see you, and you definitely have friends in this space. I'm here every Friday, and we got some repeat visitors here in the space with us as well, which is so amazing. You are so welcome. I love getting to do this, and you all being here is really just like kind of the cherry on top. I mean, like I said, like me, once I get off of these, you should see me. Like I look like a deflated balloon, like a week after the birthday party, just like totally out of energy, because I feel like I put so much into these for you guys, because that's what I need to do. I'm cultivating my energy and my love inside of myself on a daily basis, and I'm giving it to myself on a daily basis. And there is so much overflow happening inside of me that every single like video that I put out, every single podcast that I put out, these live streams that I'm going to do every Friday, I feel like these are how I'm choosing to flow that excess, that overflow out into the world. And the fact that you guys are here and want to soak it up is just like one of the best compliments anybody could ever get. So yeah. There, especially if you're catching the replay, or if you're here right now, there are going to be a lot of links in the description box as far as different resources and things. I had a bunch in my notes to bring up and reference. I don't think I even talked about most of them, but we talked about some really yummy stuff. So that's really cool. Yes. So every Friday morning, we're going to do this, talk about the current transits and everything else that we're wondering about at that time. I'm also in the process of setting up my Patreon. So that is, I'm toying around with exactly how to use my Patreon, but what I'm thinking at this point is I want to use it to host some Zoom events where it's just a little bit more interactive, where I can like see you guys and we can have more of a conversation. Where it'd be like $5 to $10 a month, and there would be like a couple Zoom events a month that you could come to, and it would be more interactive and more like this was, where the Q&A and talking through more specifics, like from your guys' charts and that sort of thing. So keep an eye out for that. I'll keep you updated. I just started yesterday toying with the Patreon thing, but I'm super excited to use it to host some smaller group, more interactive sessions, whatever that might end up looking like. So thank you so much, Billy. So glad to hear that you'll be back. And everybody else that has joined this morning or has been here multiple times, I love you. I love doing this. I love this space, this little bubble of energy. And thank you so much for loving it too. I'm honored and blessed by your presence here. So until next time, you take such good care of yourselves, and so will I.